Good morning. It is Tuesday, June 27th. We're here for our regular scheduled commissioner meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners. We got our administrator and the clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from June 20th. Is there any additions, corrections, or revisions?
Nope.
No.
Okay, next we'll move down to the vouchers.
We have two today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $1,352,603.60 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,154,633.51 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next, we'll move down to the consent agenda. Two items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 and 2 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the consent agenda items 1 and 2. With no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we'll move to a time-sensitive issue. Here we have Mr. Ziegler on the phone, and it's the it's item C, which is the interbudget transfer and hire attorney position. Mr. Ziegler, are you there? Is he on the phone? Mr. Ziegler, are you on the phone? Just go over that item?
No.
Without him? Okay.
You want to take it still at this time?
If you, yeah, if we got it on the agenda right now. We're live, so maybe he'll call in.
He is currently traveling, so he is in the airport.
Right.
I'm sure he would have rather been here. So today we're going to be asking for an inter-budget transfer of $17,000. The $17,000 is currently in our 4112 line item, which is our Superior Court contracts. This is the $300,000 that we moved with ARPA funds a couple weeks ago. We're just simply asking we move these funds from the Superior Court line item up to salaries and benefits. The $17,000 is to hire an attorney that applied for one of our positions from the prosecutor's office. The current attorney's salary upstairs in the prosecutor's office is within this same grade, but the cases and responsibilities he will be holding in our office are going to be different, and they are going to be substantially larger cases. So we are trying to I guess, balance those and give him the increase to the grade 20 step 7, which is why we're asking for the additional funding to be moved. We already have the money in the budget. It has already been approved by you, the board. We're just simply asking to have that move since salary and benefits are not part of our bottom line budget for expenditures.
All right, questions?
How does the proposed compensation for the position in your office compare with comparable compensation for a comparable position in the prosecuting attorney's office?
I believe they are the same as, he is currently in that same grade right now. So he is on grade 20 in the prosecutor's office. We are hiring him at grade 20, step 7. So it is the same line.
Same grade, several steps different?
Correct.
So,
Mr. Chair, I do have Larry
Yes.
Ziegler on my cell phone. I could certainly put him on speaker to make a statement. And Larry, I got you on speakerphone. I know you're having some challenges in the airport. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm going to put you up to my microphone. So essentially, if you want to make a statement about today's ASR and the reasoning, but Whitney is here on your behalf as well. But I did want to give you the opportunity to speak. So you are a go if you'd like, sir.
Who has questions?
We had one from Commissioner Peck, which Whitney answered, and so essentially you have the floor right now.
All right. My position, I've tried to make it as crystal clear as I can and as succinct as I can. I went to the commissioners. I told them what the situation was statewide. I told them what the situation was in the Yakima Valley. I explained what the relationship of Yakima, Benton, Franklin. Yakima, which started it, Benton, which followed suit. Franklin was then in a position, the OPD office, well, very serious situation. That was the sole request for the additional funds. It was my understanding when the commissioners allocated that money, that as long as it was spent for the purpose for which I requested it, which was coverage, somehow to get coverage to at least replace Mr. Dow, who left to go to Benton County, we were going to be in even worse trouble. In fact, we would almost be dysfunctional. And that's the only reason we proceeded the way we did. This young man came to us from the prosecutor's office. We negotiated back and forth. He indicated an interest in working, doing the job. I can fit him in, but we eventually arrived at the salary. And then everybody got upset. But as far as I'm concerned, what we've done is exactly in keeping with what the commissioners authorized. My position is the commissioners have the authority not only to set policy, they have the authority to set policy aside, particularly on an emergency basis, which is what we're dealing with today. And that's all I need. I need this coverage. The county needs this coverage. And I can't make it any clearer or any more succinct than that.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I've got some comments. Mr. Ziegler, I don't disagree with anything I heard you just say. Clearly, we have a shortage of qualified attorneys to fill positions both in the PA's office and in OPD. Clearly, the board did give authority for additional funding to help you plus up your office, something we'll also need to do with the PA's office. I think the only issue here is that it appears that these funds, instead of being put in your account where you'd have access to them as personnel funds, apparently went into a court fund where it does require the commissioner's authority to move it from A to B. And that's a lesson learned in the future. If this happens, we just need to put it in the right fund. That's really the only issue I see with it. As far as the perception of departments stealing from one another, it's never been my view that we should constrain employees from free movement if they want to move to another office and work there, irrespective of what their motivations and reasons might be or what you might tell them or anything else. It's really up to them. So I don't see any conflict or issue there either frankly, the only thing I see in this is a real minor administrative thing, and that's on the resolution, the last stanza where it says, "Now therefore," it just ends with the word and I don't know if that was intended. It says, Franklin County Board of Commissioners approves the interbudget transfer of $17,000 from one account to another. Accordingly, hereby approves the position at grade 20, step 7, and then it just stops there. So I don't know if there was some other request that was supposed to be in this resolution, or if that "and" is just an artifact, and if it is, we can just call it a Scrivener's error and cross it out.
That is my error.
All right, we'll just cross out the word "and," that'd be fine. I just want to make sure there wasn't some other piece to this.
Correct.
Okay.
Mike, can you summarize that? That was garbled and broken.
Essentially, Commissioner Peck agrees there's a crisis going on. You had a little Scrivener error at the end of the ASR, so
Yeah.
so that's fine. It's just sort of a clerical error, but obviously the board still has to make a motion and approve it. But at this point, I would say things are looking positive, but still needs to be moved forward by the board.
Right, and I would caution, well, I shouldn't use the word, it's not my place to caution. I'm recommending that they also keep in mind that there seems to be a school of thought at certain places in the county that this transfer between departments, that somehow we're locked into this. Well, first of all, a deputy prosecutor and a public defender, you don't equate the two. They have totally separate jobs. But number two is the legal authority of the board to set policy aside, to amend policy anytime they think that it's necessary to provide services that the county is required to serve. And I think that trumps any discussion from any other department in the county as to what they think or don't think about what's been going on here and what has to be done for us to, fulfill our obligations. And that's the bottom line for me.
Okay, Larry, anything else you want to add? And I'll let you hang up and get on your flight.
Okay, no, just Whitney can carry the ball.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for calling.
All right, have safe travels.
Thank you.
Discussion?
Just one final note, Chairman, that is that while I agree with Mr. Ziegler's assessment that the board establishes policy and the policies we make, we can change, that's clearly the case. But when you're dealing with budgets that are approved through a public hearing process, it's not as simple as us just telling the departments, go ahead and we'll just waive the policy. I think the way it's being done here is proper, and I don't have an issue with it. The only thing I would ask is that we remember that attorneys, like other talented people we need in the county, are in short supply, and we need to make sure that our OPD office is appropriately staffed and financed, and we need to make sure that we do that equitably for other departments, whether it's the PA's office or anyone else that has a critical shortage. Thank you.
I would just agree with Mr. Ziegler. I think he's presented it very clearly that we are in a crisis situation, and we need to do everything within our power to make sure that that's rectified, and also in the same time keeping care of all of our other employees in the courthouse. So I'm in favor of it.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2023-183 as presented.
Second, with a note that we've already agreed to a Scrivener's error correction at the end of the resolution, the word "and" to be stricken.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-183 with a note of the Scrivener error. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right, we'll back up now and we'll go to public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment?
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am here because of recent news events. When we were raising our 5 children, they'd all often, have, as children do, as siblings do, would fight. And we never settled those fights. What we would do is we would put them on what we called the love bench. And we told them, go over there and learn how to communicate with each other and figure it out. And we never had to be the referee. It was wonderful. And they still to this day, they get along very well. We have a situation. We have two great men. Our sheriff can be loud, proud, bombastic, and isn't it wonderful? Because that's exactly what I want in a constitutional sheriff who protects my freedoms and my rights. We have an auditor who can be particular and over people's shoulders sometimes and irritating, I'm sure. But isn't it wonderful? That's exactly what we need in an auditor. My feeling is that there is not good communication. And those are policies, as we heard Mr. Ziegler just here, on policies that are set by the county. Now, I know back when the auditor and coroner situation happened, I asked at that time, is there a policy on how to do that? Because there was bad communication. And because of that bad communication, the commissioners rightly felt, okay, this was not handled right, we're going to take care of this and move on. I see the same situation here. There was not good communication on the per diem or whatever policy. I don't know if that was voted on and decided by the commissioners or if it was decided by the auditor's office, but it really should be set by the commissioners. But it needs to be with all the departments. Maybe they need to create a committee and create a policy handbook. I've never worked for a company, or even in my church, we have a policy handbook. So everybody knows. It's a great communication tool. And everybody understands, and everybody can say, hey, that policy needs to be changed, and propose a change. It's very flexible. So today, I have a check for $22 to pay for the sheriff's overage. And I ask that there be some communication happening, and let's get over this silliness, because it is a matter of pride. And I have stated many times, pride is a fool's trophy. Nobody wins. And everybody needs to calm down and handle it. So that's Mother Hatch talking. So here is my check. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Mike, do we have anybody on the phone?
No, sir.
Anybody else?
Well, I'm back up here again to chew on the assessor's butt. When you go down there and you prove them wrong, and it's obvious they're wrong, why don't they sit there and change it instead of telling you so? Go to the Board of Equalization. Well, I did. I got all the paperwork filled out, but I'm going to tell you what, the average citizen out there wouldn't have a clue on how to do a comparative value on what their property's worth. And if they took, just like on my daughter's house just sold at the end of last year, and assessed for $36,000 more than what it sold for. And if I took that as an appraiser, I'm sure Mr. Hollingsworth would say, if I took that to an underwriter, they'd kick my butt down the road and start hiring somebody else. I think the assessor's office ought to be holding press conferences and getting out newspaper interviews and staying open late and extending the deadline for people to protest what their assessed value is and help them down there instead of saying, here's the paper, fill it out. And I know one thing he said, that your taxes aren't going up because the levy's going down. Well, I'll guarantee you mine went up $100,000, and my taxes are definitely going to go up, and not just the school district. It's going to be the money you're going to be bringing in.
Anybody else for public comment?
Morning. Chris Hollingsworth. I just want to report back to you guys that the assessor's office did reach out to me last week, and we had a pretty good conversation, some good email back and forth, where we're exchanging information. I don't know how my information is being perceived, but at least the door's open for communication, which is a positive thing. One thing I did note, and I got from the assessor's office, and I was just talking with John about it, is one of the points I brought up to the chief appraiser was I felt that the time adjustments, the market, or the time adjusted sales prices were a little high. And so she gave me a chart here without time adjustments. And it's the county, I don't know if it's countywide or citywide. Well, it says Franklin County. So countywide, and it's at 102.6 on average. So with that, and I confirmed with her what it meant, and the actual sales price and the market assessed value, the assessed value is 102.6% of the sales price. So we're about 3% over what they actually sold for. Pretty good, in my opinion, margin of error. 3% over is good. I just don't understand why the time adjustments are needed. I was talking with John, and apparently the Department of Revenue requires such analysis and adjustments. So I'm learning too as we go through this. I know that the Department of Revenue puts a lot of things on the assessors, what they can and can't do. But I spoke with the clerk at the Board of Equalizations this morning, and what she recommended is when you come into the assessor's office and you have your information, and there's only so much they can do that they're allowed to do. And so she recommended, just because you get a no, still go through your appeal. If you go to the Board of Equalization, the assessor's office is on equal playing foot as the homeowner. Have your information, get yourself a comparative market analysis from a realtor, an appraisal from an appraiser, whatever you need to do, an old appraisal. Apparently they'll allow 2 years worth of appraisals. Get your information, file your appeal. You don't need to have that information when you file. You can check a box that you will provide the information at a later date, provide that information, get it, provide it later. You have, I think, 21 days from the date of your hearing to provide that information. File your appeal. That's all July 3rd, you got to have it in, file your appeal. Because there's only so much the assessor's office can do and will do just by you coming in. Even though they're encouraging you to come in, I don't know how many have been modified or altered. Be a good question for you guys to ask, what is happening when people come in.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
I'll be kind of in between Mr. Dockstetter's chewing and this gentleman. I feel like if the job was done correctly in the beginning, there may not be all of this encouragement repeatedly to file an appeal. That is a lot of work for some people. They may not know how to go about it. I went down to get a packet from the assessor's office. It's a fairly, 3-4 page packet. And it goes through a lot of the things we've heard here, but nowhere on it does it say where someone can mail the information. It talks about online, and that's fine for people that have a computer, a desktop, know how to navigate that. But you would think that at least the address of where to mail would be clearly printed on that document. I looked at it several times and I couldn't find it. The lady downstairs was quite helpful. I believe her name is Jennifer, secretary with the Board of Equalization, perhaps. Another gentleman in the assessor's office called me Angel, was very helpful and very nice. But I'm going to read a couple of things quickly here that I have a problem with. The assessor stated that the sole purpose of their office is to set values that are equitable and fair across the county. He states he's, quote, been over the numbers with you, ran all the QAs, looked at things upside down, backwards, and certainly not going to be way over. Looked at it every direction you can imagine, and it shows up, whatever that means. We don't just pull it out of our hat. We have lots of thought and data. And he goes on to say, if I could change it on a whim, I would. I don't think that the public outcry is anything even close to a whim. So repeatedly encouraging people to file an appeal, it's your right to do so as a citizen, he says. And his assistant says the intention is for you to file an appeal. And that there were questions regarding overassessing. And she mentions myriad of statistics to test this module. And if it's not in compliance, the module's rerun. So she claims her position is a large, thankless job. Well, I think it's a very important job. I'm sure it's very difficult. But if the module's not working right, then I don't think you should just spit it out and send it. So I think transparency and accuracy from this office is lacking. And I think public trust has been harmed by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Still nobody on the phone?
No, sir, nobody on the phone.
Anybody else for public comment in the room? Okay, we'll move down to regular business then. The first is the public hearing continued. This public hearing is open at this point in time. It's a Shoreline Master Program update. Mr. Bratton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this, we believe we're done. It's providing everything meets with your satisfaction. There were no requests from Ecology to change, so we're just here to close the hearing and hopefully take final action on the Shoreline Master Program. And, of course, answer any questions.
Is there any questions, Commissioners?
Derek, did you have any read-ahead materials for us? I didn't see any this week.
No, nothing's changed since I provided last week, was it last week? Yeah, the ecology's notice to you. That's the only new information since then. The reason I didn't ask that you take action last week was because I wanted to make sure everything was signed and everything was prepared for it. So it's basically just a continuation of the packet.
And as I recall from the previous meeting, you were actually waiting to find out whether or not Ecology had any issues that we might have to address. It wasn't just signing paperwork. And for me, that held the door open waiting to see if Ecology had concerns, because that would obviously change our analysis. And so I didn't come in today anticipating voting on approval.
I apologize
If
for that.
if I had seen that request in the resolution here, or excuse me, in the agenda, I certainly would have gone back and read it again.
I apologize. I thought
so
that
just-
was communicated last time.
Just a
Yeah.
point for reference, it is a change. This time you're actually looking for approval.
action, yeah.
The agenda says it's a periodic update. So no changes from Ecology.
Correct.
And no requests for any interveners, no one having a,
That's correct.
okay. And remind me, if you would, please, what's the update cycle on the plan?
It's a 10-year update.
It's a 10-year.
Yeah, and basically, we did not modify the maps. What we did was, it was reviewed against changes that had occurred over the last 10 years, the comprehensive plan update, and various other potential changes in regulations. That was all basically gone over. The best available science was assessed to make sure that we were referencing the best available science, those types of things. It was almost a cleanup, more, just bringing it into line with current regulations and requirements from the state.
Okay, so I recall that. I appreciate your refreshing my memory. You mentioned the comp plan. Obviously, this has to be consistent with and in concert with the comp plan. It can't run counter to it, and yet our comp plan is not yet completed and approved. I presume you're working on the basis that the pending legal challenge, for which we've not heard a response since the last hearing, that the subject matter of those appeals and legal challenges would not overlap or in any way impact this shoreline plan?
That's correct. The challenge there is regarding the specific designation of certain types of
Franklin
land.
soils and so forth.
Right.
Here, I recall all that. I just wanted to be clear and on the record that if we were to approve this, it doesn't confound or in some way conflict with this other pending legal matter on our GMA,
That would be correct.
or on our comp plan, sorry, under the GMA. Okay, all right, thank you.
And I believe last meeting, Derek, I asked for our legal review. Who was it from our legal team that reviewed it?
Jeff
Jeff did.
Briggs.
And it's signed?
Yep.
Okay. Just want to make sure that we have our legal review and it's signed.
All ordinances must be signed before I submit them.
Yep.
This was just a little weird because of timing. So,
Any
but
other
we
questions?
do have it signed now.
No questions.
All right, if there isn't any other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
I'd ask you to
yeah.
close the hearing first.
Thank you, Commissioner Peck. At this time, I'll close the open public meeting and entertain a motion.
Move for approval of ordinance 04-2023 as presented in the matter of the Shoreline Master Program periodic update.
Second?
Been a motion and a second for ordinance 04-2023. With no further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next, we'll move down to the approval of higher appraisal position at grade 15, step 6.
I think the read-ahead is pretty clear, Commissioners. I don't know if you have any questions. We have had an opening in the appraisal department from an individual that had left us several weeks ago. We did put it out, interviewed a tremendous amount of individuals this time compared to normal. Narrowed it down, did extra interviews with individuals, and we've narrowed that down to one individual that certainly more than qualifies at a level 17. Currently, we can only bring them in without commissioner approval at a 15 step 1. So we need to make this person an offer at a 15 step 6 so that we can get them on board. They do qualify at a level 17, but I have no openings at that level for that. And the date on the actual personnel action form for starting would need to be filled in by hand. They would like to start the 11th if we can get this accomplished. It was being discussed between the 5th and 15th, but it is narrowed down to the 11th now if we can get this approved. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioners?
How many openings do you have in your office?
This will fill, we'll have no openings after this one is filled.
And have you been experiencing staffing issues in your office as far as finding candidates that are?
We have in the past. We've actually had to hire individuals and train them from scratch as trainees. The market is changing. We're definitely having experienced appraisers and individuals that meet different qualifications that are now applying. Unlike anything I've ever seen in our office in the last 2.5 years, or others in my office have seen the last 6 years. We are getting some very highly qualified individuals applying for these professional positions. I don't know how long that'll last, but that's currently the way it is, at least on these applicants for this one position.
Would that be possibly because home sales are declining?
This individual is not from this area, so are sales declining here, slowing down? Absolutely, but other parts of the state, they've almost done a reverse. So we're not impacted like other parts of the state. And several of our applicants were from outside this area and wanting to move into this area. So, and this one individual that was a finalist would be coming from the west side.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Rosenau, I think you just said you had several applicants,
Correct.
and were any of the others qualified for the position?
We narrowed it down to 3 that we felt that would be qualified and be a fit for our office, and then we did second interviews off of those, and this was the candidate that came out in the lead of those.
About how many applicants did you have in total?
I would say about a dozen in total. Less than half of them actually qualified.
So a minute ago, you said you had 3 that qualified. It sounds like you had about 6 roughly that qualified. So let me,
That could qualify, yes.
okay. And the individual you'd like to hire at the higher rate, sounds like you feel is the most qualified, most experienced.
The 3 finalists, any one of those 3, I would be coming before you for this type of a step increase off of the grade. Not a grade increase, but a step increase for any one of those 3 finalists. All 3 of them were of that high a caliber and capable to performing the functions. This individual, we felt, after a second interview, and the second interview, we pulled in the entire team. Everybody got to have, visitation, and it was a pretty unanimous that this was the number 1 candidate for our office.
Sure. And what's the salary for the position prior to the requested increase?
I don't have that in front of me. I do have the cost for this year would be about $1,300. Next year would be about $11,000, so that from a step 1 to a step 6 would be about $11,000 annually.
So the position is advertised at a step 1. So,
We actually, it's advertised for the full broad range.
okay,
It says all the way, this is the from here to here. The top would be a 7. That's the way it's advertised. So
so do you have a ballpark on what the total or the salary is for the position?
I do not have that on me. I don't.
Trying to get a sense of the 11,500, how much of an increase, or not an increase, but what does the base salary look like for the position between the step 1 and the 7? That's frankly, I don't
I can
recall.
guesstimate it. I think it's somewhere mid-50s to mid-60s, but I'm just pulling that off of my head.
Yeah. So my concern here is that we've all acknowledged that the county is facing budget challenges. We've all acknowledged that we'd like to hire the best candidates that we can get. Sometimes, frankly, we can't afford to do that. And I've said for more than a year now that as we make these kinds of decisions for grade and step increases, that we have to be mindful of what this cumulatively and collectively does to our budget going forward. I'm of the opinion that we're going to face some pretty serious budget challenges next year. And increasing the number of people that we bring in at the top step or at higher grades, I think frankly is going to translate to the potential certainly of seeing what we saw in 2010, which is when we had to cut the budget and do layoffs of staff at about 10%. It concerns me greatly. You've got a number of applicants here who can meet the requirements of the position, and you want to hire the one that's at the step 7, and I can understand as an elected and having responsibility for the department, you want the best people you can absolutely get, which is not always the same as the best people we can absolutely afford. And for that reason, because you've already said you had 6 people roughly who were qualified, 3 you thought were good enough to bring them before your staff, and because you have not actually offered the position at a lower step and had it turned down, and if you have, please correct me, but I don't think you have.
We have had discussions about the step pays. We know what the 3 individuals that were in the finalists would be willing to take to come to work for us.
Did they
That
tell
has
you?
been discussed.
Did they tell you what? Did they tell you what they'd be willing to take? They set an amount?
Well, they know the range, and so I certainly know where they fall within that range from a step 1 to step 7 on a 15.
Okay, I'm sorry, you just said you know what they would take.
Correct. It would require the upper end of the range for any one of those 3 to come to work for us,
And that's your opinion, right?
based on discussions with those candidates, yes.
Okay, so did any of them tell you that that was what would be required for them to come work for you?
Yes, they did indicate that, yes. So, and of the, say, 6 or 5 that would probably be qualified, literally the only ones that, without putting it back out, that I would offer would be one of the 3 finalists. And all 3 of them we're qualified at a level 17 as far as their knowledge, skill set, abilities, and they're willing to come in at a 15 if we can get the step up.
Okay. Well, we've got a county administrator in our previous meeting who talked about the notion of raising taxes next year. And I think we need to be looking at constraining our spending. And while I understand and appreciate and respect your desire to hire the very best person that you can, going from the advertised bottom of the scale to the absolute max of the scale is problematic for me. If you'd come in at maybe a step 3 or 4 or something, it might be a different discussion. But I simply think we have to be more conscious of the mounting costs that are going to hit this county when a lot of these increases for personnel positions have been funded through one-time money. And next year, when that one-time money is gone and we have to make salary for all these people, these parts and pieces are going to add up. And I
Totally understand.
I believe you to be a fiscal conservative, so I trust that you're on board, at least philosophically, with what I'm saying here. You have the role as the head of that function to get the very best people you can, and I have the role to people's pocketbook. So I appreciate your answers.
And I've taken both of those into consideration, and that's why even 3 of the last 5 employees we hired as a trainee, which was a level 14, to get them up even to a 15 with training and turn money back in from the previous employees that had left because their salaries were much higher. So if you look at these, it's not the top of the range, it's a 6, not a 7. We're not going to be able to take them to a level 16 or level 17 because we don't have openings for that. So it is still staying at a level 15. But it is a step 6 request to be able to get any one of those 3, and this candidate was our number 1 choice.
And they'd be eligible for a 7 when, next year?
After their probationary period, which would be next year.
Which is when
Correct.
I'm predicting
And that was
a budget
calculated
crunch.
into that 11,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
I got one.
Okay.
We're talking about an open appraisal position,
Correct.
and we're using mass appraisal.
Correct.
And mass appraisal is supposed to make it easier? I mean, I'm looking at this.
If we weren't, well, mass appraisal is very complex in and of itself. However, if we weren't looking at this, it would require a staff of 45 to 60 appraisers for us to get out and do what we're doing on a fee appraiser type basis. And then, to be honest with you, it would not meet the statutory requirements that we're required to do in our office. So there is a big difference between a fee appraisal and a mass appraisal statutorily. And we're required to do that one. So instead of 45 to 60 employees out in the field doing that, we've got 6 plus our chief appraiser. And that is still minimal staff to handle nearly 40,000 parcels. And, you know, we set those statistically every single year. Every one of them is statistically looked at, but 1/6 of all of those are physically inspected, looked at, new photographs, not to mention all of the new construction that has to be done. So are we even close to being staffed where we probably should be? No. But I am definitely trying to be fiscally conservative in that area, as Commissioner Peck brought out.
All right.
So, and during the elected time, I'll give you some statistics and numbers of calls and so forth. This isn't really the time for that.
Mr. Rosenau, if I may, before you
Yes.
go into the data, you just said we're not even close to being staffed where we need to be, but I think it's an unfair and frankly inappropriate comparison to say that if we were to go out and do fee appraisals, we'd need 40, 50, 60. It's inappropriate because the statute doesn't require that. The statute doesn't require that on purpose because it knows that it would take 40, 50, 60 and that the public shouldn't be burdened with the cost of employees to do that. So I think the fair comparison is what's required under the statute. And I think the chairman properly spoke to the fact that, this is a mass appraisal process, and that's what we're asking your staff to do. So to compare your staffing to what it would take to do fee appraisals just doesn't work.
And my statement about not being adequately staffed yet was based on mass appraisal, not fee appraisal.
But a
So-
moment ago, you said this would make you fully staffed.
With the openings that we have. The commissioners didn't approve budget requests for additional staffing for this year, but based on what has been approved, this will get me fully staffed with what's been approved. Not necessarily maybe what's needed, but what's approved.
So then, am I correct that what you're telling me is that even if this position were filled, you do not have the staffing to do your statutory obligations in your office?
We are scraping to be able to meet all statutory requirements from administrative as well as appraisal sides of it with the staffing that we currently have. I won't put down the staff one bit. They've done a phenomenal job. I can tell you that our chief appraiser went for 5 weeks without a single day off, including weekends, without working. And even when we were at conference, she was up and doing things at 4 in the morning. We were doing emails. We were back here. We're burning maybe the courthouse doors aren't open, but that doesn't mean we're not in there working. Now, the staff that would be overtime and getting pay for that, we can't do that. We'd have to have budget monies from the commissioners to work overtime and do that. But my exempt staff have definitely been working more hours.
I certainly hope and expect that you're arranging for appropriate comp time for them later in the year. Tax attorneys
We're
work
working on that.
23 hours a day.
As times slack up, we will make accommodations as best we can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are your staffing levels to the point to where you can keep up with new construction?
I'll know that by the end of July, whether we were able to get everything in the documents and whether we'd be able to get it all out on statistically and in the systems by the end of August. So we definitely are trying our best. We're hurting because we've been down for a few weeks, one appraiser, and that does hurt. Even bringing this person on board, there's some time frame to get them up and going into the system, computer accesses, all of those things take a little bit of time, them becoming familiar with the county. But there's a lot that they can just hit the road running with because of their experience.
Well, I realize that your staff is working extremely hard because I know that the phone calls are coming in at a pretty alarming rate.
I will throw at you, in the first 2.5 weeks, we took over 900 phone calls. Approximately half of those were dealing with property assessments and so forth. We have a lot that has to do with seniors and other, our GIS cartographers and segregations and combining properties and that. So we did ask IS. I did not have this data last week, but we asked IS, and they quickly, within a couple of minutes, pulled up data for us on the phone usages and that, because we knew that we were answering calls, but I think the wrong number was out there to a lot of people. So in over 900 phone calls that came in 2.5 weeks, or through up till last Tuesday morning, only 12 went more than 20 seconds ringing in our office without getting answered, out of over 900. And that data came straight from IS. So they are very diligent. They're working hard. They're a tremendous group of people. I've had lots of people work for me. I wouldn't trade one of these.
Well, I'm glad to hear that your staff is working hard, and we're trying to do everything we can to make their life as good as it can be. I appreciate their hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's struggling because we have other areas in the courthouse with trying to find attorneys, and
Absolutely.
I'm glad to hear that you're staffed to a point where you're operable. It does make it very difficult to make these decisions when our prosecutor's office is suffering, but I do appreciate all the hard work that's coming out of your office. And
This is unusual. Like I said before, we've had to go clear back to trainees and start from scratch and train them all the way up to get them accredited. This is kind of, in a way, a breath of fresh air in the sense of having an opportunity like this to be able to get somebody in. And it's still going to be a grade 15. Doesn't change from that. Doesn't jump them into a grade 16 in a year or the 17 unless we have an opening, and they would be filling that in the future for one of the openings, which right now we don't have an opening in those areas. But certainly they have qualifications and capability, should we have those openings, to be able to be considered strongly for that kind of a move in the future without training somebody up more from scratch in those areas.
Sure, and training is expensive, so.
Yeah,
I do
it's
appreciate it.
tremendously expensive. Yeah, yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
we
thank
would
you.
spend more than that on training somebody from scratch, the $11,000.
Right.
Yeah, in 1 year.
I appreciate all the hard work that's
Yeah.
coming out of your office, I really do. Thank you.
So, Mr. Rosenau, because your position is already graded at a 15 and you've had 6, by your own estimation, qualified applicants, I don't think the issue of what it would cost to train somebody is really on point here. You've got qualified applicants for the position. You've said that you're nearly fully staffed. You've just got this one vacancy, and you've got a half a dozen candidates that, again, by your own estimation, were qualified and could fill it. A good amount of the work that's happening in your office, again, by your own description in previous meetings, is driven by a statutory change in the legislature in which they changed the criteria for eligibility for seniors. And that, as I'm paraphrasing, but that this was a hurdle that you get over. It's not a recurring change every other year. In fact, it's been several years, a number of years since this change has happened. So that part of the workload, thankfully, is about to be behind us.
It's just actually getting ready to start.
Well, you're
August 1 is when that work starts.
If I may. Whether we're talking today or 3 months from now or 6 months from now, when I say it's about to be behind us, I mean this is not an ongoing year after year thing. This is a peak in workload. The unusual nature of the workload we're seeing now, in my opinion, having now talked to many constituents, I've literally lost track of how many, appears to be the result of some manner of change. I'm trying to be as gracious as I can here and not say that there were errors. It could very well be that the state's guidance and the state's model itself is defective. I don't know. I don't know where the problem is. But clearly there's some kind of a problem on these assessments. And that's really what is driving things right now. And again, that's not a permanent, long-term situation. We're going to be through this in the next 3-4 months, I would guess. That's all to say that we'd all love to have the very best, most qualified people we can get. There's no shame in that. In fact, I would be surprised if anybody in the room wanted anything but that. But you can't always afford what you want. I don't want to get into repeating what I've said earlier, but new construction is frankly down, correct?
From last year, it appears it is. We don't have all those numbers yet. We're right in the middle of that. The amount of new construction permits are certainly not down. We have over 4,000 of them that we have to be out doing. So as far as the numbers of them, they are not down. Maybe
So
what
you-
the total
excuse me,
dollars are.
You do assessments on permits?
Permits let us know that there's new construction. When they get a permit, then there's new construction at that site or that area or whatever it might be, and therefore that goes on our list to go out and assess
Yeah.
because we know there's something new there. So we
Well, for
also pick up during the earlier part of the year a lot of things that maybe people didn't go get a permit for that we have spotted, that then this time of year we go back out and pick up any of the changes there on that ourselves.
Yeah. Well, forgive me, I've been doing this for a while, and I can tell you flat out, permits do not tell you how much new construction there's going to be.
No, I'm just telling you the
Well,
number
you
of
just said that a
permits.
minute ago.
The
Yeah.
number of permits compared to the number of permits last year, compared to the number of permits the year before. Give us an idea.
It's a vague idea,
Yeah.
but we don't need to get hung up on that point. what has really altered the market, as we all know, is the cost of money and the availability of land in this market.
Absolutely.
And I think that new construction is down considerably, but I may be wrong on that. We'll find out. But the point is, I'm hearing you make your arguments, and you know, God bless you. You're trying to take care of your staff. You're trying to do your function. I get all that, but we also need to be precise in what we say. And I think a lot of the current workload is transitory due to the statutory change. I don't think that new construction is a big part of the budget, or the burden, excuse me. And you've, I believe, offered those as rationale for why you need the most senior qualified person you can get here. And frankly, I think the functions that you need done in the job can be done with any of the qualified applicants. If it can't, then your qualifications for the position were misadvertised.
Any other questions, commissioners?
No.
Thank you. So if there's no other discussion,
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-182 as presented.
Second?
there's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-182. Is there discussion?
Mr. Chairman, as I've just said, that I don't fault Mr. Rosenauer for trying to get the very best people that he can get in his office. I think any of us would try to do the same. I'm increasingly concerned about the fiscal health of this county, and I don't think we're in a position that we can afford to have everything that we want. And I think the behaviors of the county at large, including this board with our approvals of various positions over the last year, is going to come back and bite us financially. And the people who ultimately are going to pay for that are going to be employees in the county who get laid off. And so I think if there's a time for fiscal constraint, it's pretty evident to me that when we have the county administrator talking in open public meetings about possibility of increasing taxes and the need for more taxes, and at the same time we've got 6 people who are qualified for a position, but we're going to try to insist on hiring the most expensive top-end person. It's what we'd all like to have, but it's not what we, the taxpayers, can afford. So for that reason, I will not be supporting the request.
And I agree about the financial situation of the county. And I'm just talked to 2 neighbors this morning, early this morning. One approached me about the appraisal of his property. The other was a well-known farmer out here that are contemplating not even picking their cherries because they don't have a market for them. California had such a high market, and they're weighing whether they pay for the labor to pick the cherries or just not to pick them and let them hit the ground. That's how severe it's getting out there right now. Hay is at $200 and all we're doing is adding more of a burden onto our taxpayers. We have already approved a grade 15 step 1. I think that you should probably bring them in at 15-1 and move them up as they go through the grace period, move them up. But I can't foresee right now supporting bringing in anybody higher than this. We're waiting for this consor salary survey, and I thought we were going to put a hold on everything until we got that back. But, you know, we've got more in front of us here after this. So at this time, I can't support this. I think a 15-1 is adequate to bring somebody in on.
So with what's before us today, it's either a step 6 or,
Step 1.
or, well, can we make that choice, or is it?
We've already approved a 15 step 1.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, there's a motion on the table, and the board's in discussion. For further comments really aren't appropriate at this time.
It's the board's discussion right now.
So the motion that is on the table is for the level 15, step 6.
Yes.
If this fails, I would be inclined personally to motion for something of a more moderate level. but I am still opposed to the level 15, step 6, and I think we need to proceed with this motion. And then if anyone wishes to take action after that, certainly the board has the purview to do that.
Through my previous discussion, they were already approved for a grade 15, step 1. He's coming before us for an increase to hire a person that is more adequate. So there is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Well, as much as I would like to hire at that level, there is such a crisis in the prosecutor's office, OPD. At this time, I think we should put our concerns towards those offices, because I agree that financially, we're looking at some very hard times coming forward.
All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor of Resolution 2023-182, say aye. All opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. All right, that moves us down to,
Would I be able to address the commissioners?
go ahead, Mr.
I certainly understand where you're coming from, but I still have position to fill in my office. It is going to be extremely difficult to fill that at a 15-1 with any of the qualified individuals. I'm just telling you that. I would certainly like to see if the commissioners would be willing to entertain a motion for the chairman to sign a personal action form at some other level, maybe a 3 or a 4, and we go from there. If he's willing to sign that based on the vote from the commissioners, we don't necessarily have to have a resolution. If you vote for it, I can just do the PAF and get the chair to sign it and present it to the applicant, see if they're willing to come on board at that.
Actually, Mr. Rosenauer, would require a resolution. It would be a formal board action. I would suggest that maybe it's more appropriate that you actually meet with these half-dozen qualified applicants and see if there's someone who's willing to accept the position as advertised, and if none of them are, then come back and see us. That'd be my advice.
There would only be 3 individuals that I'd be willing to make that to, otherwise we'd put it back out. Even though there may be 3 others, they're not a fit for the office. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, certainly if you present that to them and none of them are willing to take the position and you want to re-engage with the board, I suspect all the commissioners would be willing to have that conversation at the right time.
So my understanding is we're at least 2 weeks before the commissioners be meeting again, correct?
No, we're having a meeting next week, July 5th.
Oh, the day after. All right.
I'm going to make that announcement at the end that we are having a meeting July 5th on a Wednesday.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Next, we have item D, hire deputy prosecuting attorney at grade 20 to a 21. Mr. Sant.
Thank you, Commissioners. I think you've heard before when we've addressed the board for the situation that we have both in the Office of Public Defense as well as in the prosecutor's office. These are unique positions. I think just as a preface, it's important to recognize that we do need a modification, I think, in our matrix, similar to what we have for the sheriff's office, that kind of addresses the specific needs of those type of positions. The matrix that we have right now really isn't fitting for positions that are essentially dealing with doctors. This is as a minimum requirement for the job of a deputy prosecutor, you have to have 7 years of post-high school education, just as a bare minimum. Right now, we've got applicants that don't even have a bar license, but they're prospective applicants because they've graduated law school, they are scheduled to take the bar exam in July, and essentially the only thing that we can offer that's even remotely competitive would be bringing them on as a Rule 9, which is a special licensing provision that says if a person has completed a certain number of coursework through law school, they could come in as a Rule 9. That means that they operate under a supervision of another licensed attorney, basically in a very limited basis. That's what we've done with the previous applicant, and that applicant was able to work with us as a Rule 9, and then move up to a DPA 2, Step 1 position upon passage of the bar, which took place earlier this year. And now, the Office of Public Defense has essentially moved that same attorney to the opposite end of the scale. And so that creates a real challenge, because I recognize the issue where I have always encouraged my employees that if they see other opportunities elsewhere, especially if it's within the county, to keep them in the county family, so to speak, to move on, to take those opportunities if it's a different grade or a higher position. It's extremely challenging, though, when both of these offices, Office of Public Defense and our office, are essentially trying to tap into the same labor market, qualified attorneys. And it's a little bit different of a scenario when you have one of those departments be able to come in and say, hey, look, we're going to basically move your attorney to this position, and now we're going to move you all the way to the other end of the scale in the grade 20, and that's what a DPA 2 is. For practical purposes, our DPA 1 position is really not even a starter. That DPA 1 position is on par with, and no offense to the other positions that are listed, but you have like a probation supervisor, the HR specialist 2 position. Those are also listed in the same grade category as a DPA 1, which is a grade 17. I bring this up because it really highlights the problem that we have when we're trying to hire very specialized positions. We're essentially running an emergency department with doctors, and we don't have doctors to treat the emergent situation that we have. Cases continue to come in. Criminal cases continue. Unfortunately, just because the legislature has made drugs a misdemeanor, it doesn't mean that drugs don't continue to cause issues for other crimes, other thefts, other burglaries, people trying to perpetuate or feed those habits. So the crime will continue, whether you say all of a sudden now, hey, this is no longer a felony. It doesn't change the problematic behavior that follows it, and that's what we're basically dealing with. We get some relief by at least having a misdemeanor consequence, but that's it's just a minor issue. So what we're basically asking the board for this is the ability to bring in, I mean, we have, unfortunately, I'm going to be down mid-month of July, I'll be down 60% prosecutors. We're losing 3 other prosecutors that are leaving July 14th, July 21, respectively. So essentially what we're going to be down 60%. This request it's within our budget, unfortunately, because we do have vacancies, but the other issue is because of the issues surrounding this particular need, we can use ARPA funding. And I recognize the concerns with that, because are we setting ourselves up for any kind of failure down the road? One of the things, though, that I think is important to highlight is that even if we're talking about within our existing budget constraints, because we've lost experienced DPAs at the higher steps, higher DPA 2 step, higher senior DPA is leaving as well, that is going to free up money from this perspective. And that's something that we've looked at all the time. We don't look at just what is going to be the fiscal impact for a given year. What is going to be the fiscal impact if we bring someone else in and they're going to obviously be eligible for step increases for the years after. At this point in time, it's going to be a considerable period of time, I think, before we catch up with the provisions, because looking at who we're attracting right now, and that's going to be the real challenge for us, is that we're getting entry-level folks that don't even have their bar license. We have one of those individuals that's set to start in August 21st. The problem is we can't have these people all of a sudden be thrown into trying homicide cases and the more serious crimes. So we have to be competitive enough to attract others that have the requisite experience. One of the issues that I highlighted as well, and that'll be more addressed in the other issue that's before the board, is that when we see the initial threshold just to get basic qualified applicants for these jobs, basically having to bring them in as a grade 20 or a DPA 2, the bigger issue we have is retaining those that we do have currently within the office. If we were to lose anybody else in the office, it would basically, it would be drastic. I don't even want to go into what kind of contemplation that would be. I recognize that we were starting to have an issue last year just with the idea of recruitment, talking with HR, talking with schools, trying to figure out recruiting ideas. I met earlier this year with Gonzaga's law school because we did have an intern from their office that basically worked in our office last summer, wanted to build a relationship there so that they knew that, hey, we're trying to work things out so that people could come to our office, realize the work. Prosecutors throughout not only our state, I think throughout many states are struggling. We're just not getting people that want to engage in public service. And I think it's a great job. It's a great opportunity. Attorneys that come into this kind of work do so for many reasons. Some is because they recognize this is where you get trial experience. If you go to a law firm on civil cases, it's rare that you would get the type of trial experience that you would get from our office. Nonetheless, it certainly has changed over the years since I've been here to try to recruit and retain. So what this resolution is essentially asking the board to do is allow us the flexibility so that we can offer. I lost one candidate because in the process of the interview of bringing him in as a DPA2, he was a fairly new attorney, but he had been licensed for approximately a year. He was with another county in their defense outside of our Benton and Franklin area, so he was outside of this area. But what I was able to offer was not what he was able to receive from the county that he eventually took employment. And that county was hurting too, so we kind of joke with each other, recognizing that we're really trying to stretch, pulling from a same limited, very limited crew or pool of applicants. But having the flexibility to be able to bring people in more than just a step one or step two for these type of positions, I believe is warranted, just considering the type of quality of the applicants, just with the basic background that they have. And frankly, they are in a good position as far as bargaining because they realize it is a good market. And I recognize that we can't be on par necessarily with Benton County. We have to be close. Commensurate with our respective position and county financial position. But I recognize too, I think I was talking to Mike this past week as well, in recognizing where they're moving some folks, and they have a couple new openings where people have went to the federal system. And so again, that's our biggest, one of our biggest competitors, whether it's the county prosecutor's office or the Office of Public Defense. So what I'm asking the board on this particular resolution is to be able to hire at a 20 or 21 commensurate with the experience. Again, this is trying to recruit those individuals that have been prosecuting. We're hoping that we could try to recruit somebody that's been prosecuting over 5 years with substantial trial experience, because that's really what we need. We made a change before the board. The board may remember a couple weeks ago where we added an additional chief because we knew the people that we had coming in are going to require that additional supervision. It's going to require additional training, but it's going to take time to get those individuals up to a level where they could handle the more complex felony cases. So that's my request for the board, to give us that flexibility so that when we do have an applicant before us, we can make an offer that's competitive, within reason, commensurate with their unique experiences and skill sets. I think this is what's necessary because, like I said, we lost out on an opportunity just because I didn't have the authority in hand and I didn't want to misstate my authority to the applicant. I explained the process that, hey, I'd have to go to the board and get approval, and in the meantime, basically got an offer of where I could offer, but I had to offer something a little bit more to get them to move. So anyway, I just give that to the board by way of background. Mike and I appreciate his time working with us and trying to discuss options, as well as with Margot and HR trying to figure out what we need to do. I've talked with some of the departing attorneys, trying to get their input on what they think is necessary as far as how we reach out and market the position. And I know right now when individuals see the salary range and they see the lower end, there's an assumption out there, and so we're kind of changing our strategy of marketing where we believe we're going to have to be to offer and entice even new attorneys, because if they see that lower end of the scale, there's a presumption out there that new attorneys graduating law school, that's where they're going to start, which is at our DPA 1 level. We just can't recruit at that level, so we have to bring in folks, if they could be a Rule 9, which is a competitive rate for a Rule 9, but once they get licensed, we have to basically start them on that DPA 2 line as a bare minimum. So we're hoping that this resolution allows us the flexibility to attract some folks that have the experience that could jump in basically from day one and be able to try complex felony cases up to and including homicide cases. And we recognize not everybody's going to be eligible for a step 6 on the line 20 or step 6 on 21. That is really reserved for those that do have that requisite experience. But I think like what Larry said in his remarks, it's a different market and it's an emergent condition. It's emergent both of the prosecutor's office as well as defense. And what he recognized as one of my newer deputies experience to bring them on, we're going to need similar flexibility so that we could keep our department afloat. So I'm open for any questions the board might have.
Well, I
Questions,
appreciate
Commissioner?
your efforts to recruit and to retain. I sympathize with you because I know how hard and struggling the workforce is for your office. And I've spoken with other counties about the situation that they're moving forward with and the implications that it has on us. I mean, how do we compete with that? So no, there's definitely a need, and I do appreciate everything you're doing to try to recruit new candidates. So I'm in a agreement. I think that if we don't handle this right now, we're really going to be in a crisis down the road. So we need to do everything in our power to support our prosecutor's office and get people hired. So. I have no more further questions. I just want to say I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Sant, are you having multiple qualified applicants for your positions?
No, unfortunately, it's the bare recruitment is where we're struggling. We're just trying to get people with a bar license that are ready to go.
And in your comments, you referenced being down 60%.
That'll be as of July 21st when we lose our last of the remaining 3 that have taken jobs elsewhere.
And that's 60% of your attorney
Criminal.
staff.
That's 60% of the criminal. I still have my 2 civil.
Okay, so on your criminal side, 60% down in attorneys. I wanted to get clarity on that. I was pretty sure I understood, but I wanted to make sure we weren't talking 60% of your whole office staff.
That's correct.
This is actually 60% of your attorneys. And how many criminal attorney positions are there total?
That's 10
There's
plus
10.
myself.
Yeah, okay, well, guess that math is pretty easy, isn't it?
It worked out good in this case.
So my first concern is making sure that we're providing reasonable equity between our Office of Public Defense and our prosecutor's office. Obviously, you two work on two opposite sides of a statutorily necessary and required process, and to give undue support to one side over the other, I think creates an imbalance. And we've been pretty supportive of OPD's requests for finances and flexibility on contracting for attorneys, and done pretty much everything that I think we can reasonably to do, and maybe more than we can long-term afford to do, to plus up that office. And so I guess my question would be is, does this request, in your view, if the board were to approve it, does this give you equity or parity with OPD?
It brings us into an advantage or a similar situation to where hopefully we won't have someone leaving our office to take a higher step with OPD. because I would be able to have that flexibility to provide. And again, on the specific situation that we're dealing with, it's a more complex discussion because if I were to have moved that individual across, it has a cumulative effect on the other people in my office. For instance, I got people in my office that have been attorneys over 10 years. If all of a sudden OPD is taking one of those attorneys that has been licensed less than a year because that's what our market is, and they're moving that person to the far end of the scale, that creates a huge issue for me as a manager of a lot more attorneys, of trying to make sure that I have equity not only between OPD and my office, but within my office, of recognizing the level of experience of the attorneys that are in my office. So this does put it on par, having that flexibility with the steps appropriate within the grade 20 and grade 21. It would put us on equity. But I just want to make sure that it's understood. While that might be equity, it does create other complexities for a manager who's trying to be fair and equitable within his own department, but also recognizing the issues of our constitutional limitations with, I can't have OPD without adequate defenders as well. And I certainly have recognized that. In the past, the Office of Public Defense used to just contract with individuals. And I think what became about is they wanted to bring it on with parity with my office. And so they worked for having appropriate positions as in-house counsel where they would be entitled to the benefits, retirement and insurance and all those other benefits that come with a job rather than being contractors. So we have had people leave the Office of Public Defense and join our office for that issue, and I think part of the parity was making sure that there's now that equity where they are in-house counsel, essentially. They're DPA, or call them OPD1, OPD2 type positions, but I think both Larry and I both need to have the flexibility to be able, in this type of market, to be able to bring people in where we feel as our individual managers. I think I have a little bit different responsibility because I'm trying to look at it from the interest of the county as a whole rather than just a single department, but I especially have to focus in on the impacts it would have on my own department. So hopefully that's answers your question, but I wanted the board to really have that broader impact of the seriousness of this issue and the complexity, because it's not just a matter of bringing one person raising, because I have to be mindful if I do that, it could cause other people to leave because they're like, well, wait a minute, if you're offering that to an individual that has relatively new experience, then what does that leave us as 10-plus year deputies? So I'm trying to be mindful of that, and that does put a additional burden on me. But again, that's what we do. We try to manage those issues the best we can. And again, this just allows that flexibility so I don't lose out on the opportunity for the person that could have accepted a job had I had that authority in the beginning. It's a unique situation. I didn't envision that we would have this. I think I've mentioned to the board before, it used to be for every position in a prosecutor's office, there was at least 10 other applicants in line trying to get them. It was a very competitive world, and that's changed. And I think in some ways that's unfortunate because there's a lot of benefits to public service.
So, Mr. Sand, I see in here that this won't have any financial impact on 2023. We are also seeking to use ARPA funds, but in 2024, what would be the financial impact of this position?
I don't see that because we'll be down 6 positions, and just because of the what we have on the forecast now is I have one that has accepted a job as a Rule 9 start, and once he gets his bar results, that'll be end of September, October. Only then will I be able to actually move him up to a grade 20 step 1 position. The people that are leaving now include senior DPAs, grade 21 DPAs, as well as grade 20. And so I think just looking at all of that impact, even if I were to be able to hire direct replacements, it wouldn't have a budget impact, because even if I was to hire a direct replacement, that's not going to happen until at least August, September timeframe at a minimum. At least, I mean, if someone comes knocking on the door tomorrow, I certainly am open to it. I know with the bar results, we might attract other applicants that have passed the bar, and then they could begin the active process of looking at which offices have openings returning. We look at Gonzaga, University of Idaho as two key colleges just because of its proximate location to us. Greater chance, just like I chose to go to University of Idaho. It was close to home, close to Tri-Cities. And so we feel that we have a good opportunity there in recruiting because that might be people that actually might have ties, whether close ties or remote ties to the Tri-Cities. And that's what we're really trying to do, is attract them to come here to work for us.
So with all these positions open, why are we even looking at the ARPA funds then?
Because in my discussions with the county administrator, that would be important to tap into that. If we have those funds available and they likely won't be available, or there's concerns that I guess they could be withdrawn, let's use those now for this type of emergent situation. Let's use that outside funding so it doesn't tap into our county reserves, and any budget leftovers that we have for this year can roll into the next year's budget. I realize it doesn't work like that, where if I don't spend something in my office's budget this year, it doesn't go back to my office, but it certainly goes back to the county to be able to use for other resources. Obviously, I feel that this is a pretty critical resource for county obligations. So in answering the question for 2024, even if I was to hire replacements, because of the timing of the gap, it's creating, for every month that goes by and I'm not filling those 6 replacement positions, that's a budget surplus that will accumulate over time. And so I think even for 24, I'm still not going to exceed where our projected budget would be from this point of view today.
Any other questions?
No, I think that with the crisis that we have currently, we have to be proactive. I mean, we have a lot of hardworking individuals in your office that we need to support and retain. So I feel that if we don't address this now, that the problem is just going to exaggerate and get much worse, and maybe to a point to where we can't keep up. So I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Chair,
Mr.
permission to
Gonzalez?
speak.
Yes.
And also to put this into some more context, I've been working really closely with Sean on this. So in Benton County, at their recent meeting on June 22nd, they just raised the salary to a starting DPDA, or DPA1, I should say, to $130,000. So to put that into context, I was just looking at some of the numbers that Kelly sent over. So we have 4 prosecuting attorneys with a combined 40 years of experience who make less than a starting DPA1 at Benton County. So when you put that in context to where we compare, so raising the grade in the step would obviously allow us to compete.
Don't say that too loud.
I know. It's just I don't want to say it, but I just think we have to look at the situation that we're in.
And if we don't take care of it now, it's
going to bite us in the butt. That's certainly true.
If there's no other questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2023-184 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-184. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have some mild reservations about this request. I didn't go into them during the discussion phase because they don't rise to the level to change my decision on support or non-support. But that's the notion that this is a relatively new approach to giving this kind of flexibility and this kind of authority to an elected department head. But I think we've all acknowledged that we've done extraordinary things to keep OPD afloat and functioning. And as I started out by saying, I think equity and parity between these two functions is essential. I think we've all acknowledged that there's, for lack of a better term, a hiring emergency in the legal world these days. For the part that gives me pause is just the open flexibility on the grade and the steps. And I can get to yes on it, but I want to be as transparent as I can and just say that it's not really something we've done before, but I think the circumstances warrant it, and I don't know how we capture fleeting applicants who as Mr. Santos pointed out, if he doesn't have the authority, by the time he gets it through the process, they're off working at Benton County or somewhere else. So I'll be supporting it. I just wanted to be open and transparent. Thanks.
And I just add that we're looking at a crisis of people leaving for higher salaries, but we're also looking at a crisis where there's not personnel out there to hire. We can throw all the money at what we want. Doesn't mean we're going to get anybody. And that's the crisis we're facing, is that there's no applicants out there. This isn't going to solve the problem.
And Commissioners, just so it does assure you, because I do recognize the flexibility that's built into this, I've had a great opportunity with working with Mike and keeping him abreast of the situation. And I don't intend to be just making a bunch of hiring offers. I intend to keep him fully, up to date with where we are, what kind of applicants we're getting, so he's aware of that situation. And I'm more than happy to brief that with the board as it comes in. Obviously, I'm hoping that this could help stave off a lot of issues, and that's really is addressed in the next resolution. But I think this is a working in concert with both Mike as well as Margot and HR, just trying to strategize our marketing, trying to reach out. One of the things that I'm trying to do is build the flexibility to recruit folks that are maybe further down in their careers. Maybe they've realized that maybe it's time to look at a retirement plan. Washington State does have a pretty fairly competitive retirement plan out there in the PERS system, and trying to reach out to maybe those attorneys that are looking for a change of career that might be in their 40s or 50s, where maybe most people might be set where they're looking at. That's something that we're going to try to do, is maybe make them think that, hey, come work for us for 10 years, build up a little bit of retirement in the state system, give back as public servants. But I think that's something that is a benefit that we can offer as well. So I'll continue to work with Mike on that.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to work with him and keep us informed of what's going on. And we're giving you this flexibility, because obviously there's trust in you, and just we want to support your office.
And as soon as I get some applicants and we're starting to make offers that would be maybe outside of what would be the normal practice, I'll definitely be having those consultations with Mike and HR on seeing where we're at, seeing if we have to make further adjustments. So
No, I appreciate that, because the communication is good. Thank you.
no, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second on Resolution 2023-184. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to the 10% one-time retention payout to 6 deputy prosecuting attorneys. Mr. Sant.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, addressing the issue that we have, and I think just highlighting where our current salary range is at, it becomes very difficult when we're seeing folks at a lower level of experience being offered a much higher offer, I guess, from a starting position. And so one of the things that we definitely don't want to see is we don't want to see any further flight. I recognize this might be looked at as maybe a Band-Aid fix, so to speak. It doesn't cure the bigger need. And what I've basically been able to discuss with Mike is the fact that we have a new firm coming in there, hopefully giving this robust review of the uniqueness of attorneys, and the fact that it is difficult when you're looking with a lot of debt. There is some options with the public service student loan repayment if they serve in low-income communities, or if they do public service law, which would include either public defense or prosecutor work for 10 years, there can be some loan forgiveness. Some individuals in my office have taken advantage of that program, which is a significant benefit. But for also recognizing and trying to prevent the loss of the other valued employees that have really stuck it through and are continuing to serve with us. The crafting of this is similar to what we've seen being done in other counties. Other counties realize that if they offered incentives, like as a one-time, hey, you come work for us, stay with us for at least a year, which seems like a lot of money to get someone to stay for a year, but considering the crisis we have, This is a temporary solution, I think, that gives the salary study an opportunity to come back and look and be able to hopefully make some longer-term adjustments to our scale that recognizes probably, I think we've had conversations previously with the salary matrix for prosecutors. They really need to have more steps available because it's kind of a unique profession, just like a doctor in the ER. Years of experience build. It's the wisdom of going to trial, losing at trial, being able to figure out what works. Every year is kind of a unique position for prosecutors, and as I think what Mike highlighted is some of our top attorneys, that is going to be critical if we were to lose any of those positions with that level of experience. And what we're trying to do is be able to recruit others to fill the void of people that have that level of experience, that have taken opportunities elsewhere. This is similar to what has been done in other counties, not just as recruitment bonuses that they've structured, but this is a retention side structuring to prevent further flight from the office. And I recognize that the sum of money does seem significant. And again, we were talking about being able to use ARPA funds, just like for the Office of Public Defense, to basically cure and address this particular type of emergent situation. If we continue to have a leaking dam, we've got to patch it up and prevent further flight. And I'm hoping that this would be able to do so, not just this fix, but I think the attorneys recognize that we do have this study that was underway to try to look at some of the comparable, not just comparable counties, but looking at our market comparable employers who are competing for us. And having that been said, I recognize we can't just adopt what's been done in a different county, but we do have to be mindful of where that is and mindful that even other counties doing things financially, they're still also hurting in retaining and recruiting qualified applicants. So this is being done with the idea that, one, that prevents us from losing further qualified attorneys. It also is done with the idea that this does not fix where we anticipate the study will likely show. We also recognize that we're going to have to figure out how to compensate this. This is a one-time fix. Again, even if we didn't have access to the ARPA funds, looking at where we are with the void of the experienced attorneys that have left, this would be able to have been covered in that interim time. So looking at the budget from that standpoint, if we didn't even have the outside ARPA funding as an option, looking at the loss of 6 attorneys, and looking at the fact that of what kind of time it's going to take us to recruit any qualified applicants to replace us, we just can't afford to lose any of these remaining qualified attorneys. So I'm asking the board to consider this as a measure to retain and stop the further loss from experienced attorneys in our office. Again, we're going to be pulling a little bit more work, but we're all human, and so there's only so much more work that can be done in a day with the remaining staff. And I think this recognizes that burden, because that's one of the biggest stresses that I'm getting right now from my attorneys is that, wait a minute, if we have this many people leaving, who's going to handle all this additional work? So really, it's kind of a measure to address that immediate shortfall of work. But I've tried to assure them that we have to sometimes think smarter, not harder. We're doing everything we can to send cases to our therapeutic courts. We've had some recent meetings with them, trying to make sure OPD is mindful of those defendants that are coming in with those kind of qualifications to get into therapeutic courts. Again, with our Veterans Court, we've had 3 actual applicants that went through that process. They, for whatever reason, they turned down the request. I think they realize that sometimes it's a little bit more work, so it's not for everybody, but we're continuing to try to fill those seats as well. And that's something that's, I think, an important addition. And I know Judge Orozco and others have been talking about trying to expand the opportunity of creating a mental health court here in Franklin County, which would be a big help for relieving the burden that we have growing in our court system. We do have the help with our existing Lords program, which is the felony diversion program, where Lords gives those services, but having a court-monitored program, I think, is really key to helping us out and putting us where we need to go. I just wanted the board to be aware of that we are looking at all options of what we can do as far as our office to try to keep our community safe and make sure that when people are arrested, they're held accountable. And if that means that we have to put them into our district court, there will be an accountability, regardless of the number of attorneys. So, thank you.
So before we go too far down the road here, I would like to share a conversation that I had with our administrator this morning, and maybe a solution to this, and that is, if we do this, Sean, we're going to have every department in here, and they're going to be on our backs. So my proposal is that we're going to do this $5,000 per employee retention, and then we've talked about a department retention fund that the department can use. Mr. Gonzalez, would you like to elaborate on this a little bit?
Certainly, Chair Didier, and the $5,000 retention fund is something that's been in the works. We've been working on that, myself and Margot, Jeff Briggs, the PA's office, really since mid-May. So, and the idea with that is to give each frontline employee a $5,000 retention bonus. You sign a document that says you'd stay for a year. So that has been in the works. To put that in context, what we had talked about this morning was perhaps creating a bucket of money for each department that they can use to recruit, retain, give bonuses, and be creative in that sense. In regards to these retention bonuses for the PA's office, I do think they're necessary. You certainly could create that fund and do the same thing within that bucket to create more parity, because I will say that I have heard from departments who, once this agenda was loaded, reached out to me wanting to know about it and put it into a little bit more context. So I do want to sort of caveat, I do think the need is really great to do this for these attorneys. And I'm a numbers guy, so when I look at their office, I just put these numbers together. So they have a combined 65 years of service for the county. That's not even the time that they practice as lawyers. We're talking a guy like Frank Jenny has 30 years of service, Dave Corcoran 27, Maureen Ashley 14, Teddy Chow 14, Daniel Stover 4 just for the county, and Jeff Briggs 1. And certainly they have the leverage now, and to keep them is essential because the workloads are just extremely high. And as I had mentioned in the previous agenda item, our friends at Benton just continue to raise their salaries. So I'm certainly in favor of giving these attorneys this retention bonus because it's a specialized service, as Sean mentioned. These are not people you just find off the streets. They have gone to law school. They have passed the bar exam. They have a specialized skill, and we need them. We're in a crisis. So, and you, as I had mentioned, I think 4 of them, with all those years of service, more than 40 years, make less than a starting Benton County DPA 1. But it would be cleaner and have more parity to create sort of a bucket with the ARPA funding. So there is parity, because I want to reward all our employees. It's certainly in the law and justice portion, and we certainly could go back to the drawing board and see how that would ultimately work. I would like to continue with the 5,000 that we've already got working, and then work on this separate bucket because we've worked really hard. Marco's reached out to all the unions because it gets a little complex with the unions in terms of dealing with them, because you give unions money and they sort of look at it as leverage for future collective bargaining. But we have the unions in a good place. They agree with that. But I certainly want to give my support to the prosecuting attorney's office, because I feel like the individuals there, they've reached out to me, they've reached out to Sean, we work closely. They need, I really do think, I feel strongly they need that retention. Because they've given years of service and they've been extremely loyal to Franklin County. I know that might ruffle some feathers, but you guys ultimately will have to make that decision. But I do really think your idea, Commissioner, is a good one.
Well,
on the
every
pay.
department has their specialty people.
Absolutely.
And every department is trying to retain employees.
Yeah.
So I think if,
Employees-
depending on the number of employees per department, we can allocate some of that ARPA money so that they,
I agree.
Get
I
people
agree
they need
that's
to
an
retain.
important component too, because I think that's a good idea to create parity. And, we could certainly go back to the drawing board and maybe that's a separate issue depending on what you guys decide.
Mr.
In
Chairman.
terms of this.
Mr. Peck.
These really are separate issues, as County Administrator just alluded. Getting back to the agenda item before us, over a pretty lengthy Air Force career, I observed drawdowns and increases in the number of pilots available, and pilots are pretty crucial to the mission of the Air Force, as you might imagine. And when times were tough and we had trouble retaining pilots, the Air Force wrote pretty healthy retention bonuses for those pilots. And those of us who were in non-flying roles sometimes looked at that and said, gee, it'd be nice to get that. But we also recognize that there are certain roles and functions that are pretty critical and essential to the primary missions of an organization. We could probably discuss all day long about what those are in the county, but certainly there are positions that are statutorily required, things like OPD in the prosecutor's office, and there's a number of them. So in a roundabout way, the point I'd like to make is that I don't know that we can afford the luxury of simply broadcasting money across the entire organization with the hope of retaining additional people. I think that these sort of retention bonuses, by their nature, really is as difficult as it may be for some people to accept. They need to be targeted, and we need to apply our funds where we can get the most critical retention issues addressed. There are some positions in the county, for sure, that would not require a bonus to maintain retention, and there are others, for sure, without a bonus, we're likely to continue hemorrhaging. Mr. Sant, in his comments, made reference to this may be a Band-Aid approach. I would offer the analogy that if you're wounded in a car accident or on a battlefield or anywhere else, if you lose 60% of your blood volume, that's a tourniquet time. That's not a Band-Aid. And I use that analogy to make the point that there are some challenges for retention that are so critical that they do justify this kind of targeted retention. I don't think that we as a county can afford the luxury of doing what we'd all like to do probably, and that is just distribute it across the county evenly to try and avoid any upset feelings or hurt feelings, but that's really not the purpose. If that's the purpose, one, it runs counter to my conservative capitalist views. It feels rather socialist, if I may use the term in a public meeting. But I think these funds ought to be used judiciously and in a targeted fashion in those places where we're most likely to lose folks. And if we think that we're in the same level of jeopardy for retaining people in all of our positions in the county, and I don't agree with that, some of them clearly are more in jeopardy, then I think we ought to hold off until we get the study done and apply those funds for an across-the-board pay raise in the form of a COLA, if in fact we think that's the way it ought to be done. Just my thoughts on it, but I appreciate the support for targeted retention bonuses for critical positions as much as some of us might like to receive those and might not be eligible for them. I think if we get this study done and we look for ways to enhance compensation through the next COLA cycle, we can accomplish the same thing. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen, you have anything to add?
Mr. Sand, I mean, it's your office. Which road would you prefer to go down? With the ARPA funding to retain your employees, or the 10% raise of their current salary?
I think we're talking about the same funding pool. I think ARPA funding is funding this as well, or that would be the request, is to use the ARPA funds, because this is a critical and vital set of positions with the county, and using those ARPA funds while they are available.
And that's
makes
their
it-
intended use. I am just saying,
Right.
would you rather work with Mr. Gonzalez on trying to come up with a retention program, or 10% and be done with it?
I think this was intended to be an immediate fix to prevent any further flight, because if I lose any additional attorneys, that would put us at a real critical mass.
Sure, I understand that.
So the understanding that I had in talking with Mr. Gonzalez is that in conjunction with I forgot the name of the contractor.
The consor study.
Consor study, that this would be a delayed fix to show significant movement for the remaining attorneys, so that they understand that, look, we're taking this situation serious. That additional study will bring about additional information, and I'm hoping likewise, and that's why I say it's kind of a Band-Aid fix, because honestly, I think we need to at least increase their salary range at least 10% across the board for those key positions. I don't think 10% covers where the study will probably lead, but I think what that does is it shows a good faith effort
Right.
to make a serious movement. And I think with the additional study, it gives the attorneys hope that there will be a study that will come forth further to support that we do need to revamp our schedule. I really think that trying to plug in the attorney roles into the grade system that we have in our 7-step salary matrix, I think we need to look at a different setup, and that's going to take some time. The 10% immediate change will hopefully deter additional flight in the meantime, to give us a time as a county to really have those good conversations with Mike and the study group to figure out what we need to do. And I'm hoping that we could work up a better salary matrix that really addresses the level of expertise that we really have in recruiting and retaining attorneys.
So just to be understood, if they get this 10%, they're not going to get the 5% that we're given across the board.
I think that was something that was to be discussed, but I think
No,
that.
I won't vote for
Yeah.
a 15%, John, no.
I
And
understand.
what my whole theory is that your office is very important for the rule of law.
Yeah.
We have a treasurer's office that's very important for the collection of monies to pay you,
Yeah.
as well as the auditor's office to keep things in check. Every office is important.
Absolutely.
To signify one is more important than the other is a travesty. And to equate that to be socialism is almost embarrassing, to have that kind of comparison. But my theory was that to retain people in all these offices, that we give every office a pool of money to retain them, which would get you up to your 10%. And every other office would have the ability, and we have enough ARPA money to do this, they can retain their people too, so that we retain the people that we need to keep here in Franklin County. That's my whole thought process here. Instead of just signifying one office is more important than the courthouse, it's going to divide this courthouse to the point where it's going to be unbearable.
I
I'll
agree.
predict that right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, because obviously one of the things that I looked at in addressing this, I'm not here asking for additional for my support at this point in time, recognizing that the study will address that issue. So even within my own office, I'm well aware of the issues of inequity, if you wanted to call it that. But I'm also, as a manager of an office, I'm recognizing that if we're losing 60% of our criminal prosecutors, and I'm not losing yet on the support staff, I don't have the equivalent emergency. So again, I'm exercising triage and trying to put the resources that we have available now to where what I think is where the crisis is. I didn't mean by my presentation here today to deter anybody else's importance throughout the county. I think every one of our county employees is critical, and I think that obviously that's what the study is trying to address. And I didn't intend by my comments to suggest minimization of any other
No.
department.
and
We're all
Your
important.
comments didn't
Okay.
bring that forth.
I do recognize and I do appreciate what you're saying, because I have dealt with that even within my own office of addressing this today, and I'm trying to focus on what I see as a critical emergent situation, and that's the loss of attorneys. So thank
So
you.
the other question I
Mr.
got for
Chairman.
you is, are you going to be present in your office? Because I know you've been gone a lot. Are you going to be there now and take on cases yourself?
I've been taking on cases. I take on cases. I'm coming down here from court. I team up with my criminal chief handling the homicide cases. I think I mentioned last time we had about 18 homicide cases,
Right.
including vehicular homicide
But
cases.
you have been gone, correct?
Right, I was out 2 weeks for military service this past, earlier this month on a mission, yes.
All right, just want to make sure that you're,
Oh, I've been engaged the
Roll up
whole
your
12.
sleeve and get
the whole
in with
twe-
it.
The whole 12 years I've been here, I've been very involved in the cases, and part of that involvement is working with the attorneys that have the working relationship with the defense attorneys. So I'm very involved in all these 400-some cases that we're dealing with, and trying to make it so that we could function as an office.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Peck had a question.
No, it's not a question. I want to clarify. Apparently, Chair misunderstood my remarks. Perhaps not. I guess we'll find out. When you do retention bonuses, you're using the people's money to make a special effort in isolated cases to retain people where you believe the county is at greatest risk. It has nothing to do with whether or not we do a value or we appreciate each and every one of our employees. We do. But to suggest that our retention challenges are equal in all of the positions in the county, in my view, is nonsensical. Clearly, when 60% of your prosecuting attorney staff, those positions are vacant, and that's a critical primary core function of county government, public safety. It's far and away our biggest expenditure countywide. To suggest that retention in that office and retention in every other job and every other function in the county are equal threats to the county makes utterly no sense. My reference to a socialistic practice is the hallmark of socialism is when everybody advances and benefits equally, irrespective of their role, position, productivity, or anything else in the collective. Some people might want to argue with me about whether it's Marxism or socialism. That's fine. You can have that argument offline. But the point is, these are limited funds. They should be used in targeted applications where we have the greatest risk to losing people that are very difficult to find and replace. And forgive me if I offend anybody, but that measure does not apply equally to every other position in this county. Simply doesn't. Some positions are far more difficult to fill than others. I also noted in my comments that if we want to show our respect and gratitude, appreciation for all of our employees, then take some of these funds and use them as part of a cost of living increase or some other measure. If you want to label it as a retention, I suppose you can. But I think that we need to keep clearly focused on the fact that these are not unlimited funds, and they need to be targeted in those key and essential positions that if we don't fill them quickly and we don't retain people, we're not going to be able to do our job as a county. And frankly, that's hard as it may be for some people's feelings. That isn't true of every single position in this county. As much as I respect and appreciate each and every employee, just like when I was in the Air Force. I never received a bonus. I wasn't an active pilot. And you know what? It was the mission of the organization that targeted those funds at retaining pilots because that was a critical need at the time. So if anybody is offended by those remarks, well, I apologize, but I stand by them. Thanks.
Do you have anything, Mr. Gonzalez?
Certainly, Chair, I'll weigh in just to clarify or confirm what I've heard is, and I think all pretty good ideas as we formulate this strategy. So create a bucket of money for recruiting, retention perhaps, which would be available to all departments. The amount in those various buckets, we'd have to determine that. We're contemplating the one-time retention bonus for the PA's office, which I, on record, do support, which I think is important. And I also do support, and Margot and I have been working on with Jeff Briggs, is the one-time retention bonus that we've talked about for all employees. And I certainly do think every employee here is important, but we do have to prioritize and acknowledge some are more challenging to fill. But I think we're all in alignment that all our employees are important, and we're just in this time where we need to do something. Because I deal with every single department in the courthouse, and it's hard to keep every single employee. It doesn't matter if you're working a desk job, you're working the front desk at the Superior Court, or you're all the way up to trying a murder case. We're having challenges in every single department.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of Resolution 2023-185 as presented.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-185. Discussion. I think this is premature. I think that we better have this dialed up, that if this passes, then the retention money that we're given to all the other is not included.
And I'm in agreement. If the attorneys do get the one-time retention bonus, they probably shouldn't get the $5,000.
That's right.
That would probably create some dissension in the courthouse. But ultimately, that's your call. But that's my recommendation.
Just want clarity on that. Any other discussion? I'm not in favor of this because we're singling out the prosecuting office right now, and it is going to create some tension in the courthouse. I'll just tell you that right now. So just be aware of it. So if there's no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
I mean, it's a hard decision because it is going to create some hard feelings within the courthouse, but I feel that the prosecutor's office is in a position of crisis and extremely difficult to recruit and retain their employees. So
I've called for a vote. There's one aye. Is there any other ayes?
aye.
Two ayes, and I will vote nay. So motion passes. Moves us down to contract between Consor Survey, Salary Survey. Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a contract between Franklin County and Consor Strategic Financial Planning. This is the study that would take place of the Gallagher study. So we've been talking about that with the Strategic Growth Committee in my updates on Sundays, and I've been in close contact with Consor throughout the process. So the good thing that they're going to do is they're going to do the salary portion first. So they think they can have that complete within a couple of months. So once we sign that contract today, they'll start probably next week looking at the comparator counties, which are Yakima County, Walla Walla, Chelan, and Benton County, to give us a good outlay of how our salaries compare with those other counties. And just to go through the contract real quick for the public, basically things will start with stakeholder interviews. They'll have an economic outlook for the county. They'll do that peer county comparison, which will actually be first. We'll give revenue forecasts, an expense forecast, budgeting, reserves, debt management. They'll audit just about every facet of the organization. They'll look at strategic priorities, We'll look at public safety, courts, community services, infrastructure, environmental services, administration, and then come up with the final strategic financial plan. And I think the great thing about this study is for the same amount that we were going to spend for the Gallagher study, which would have only given us a salary survey, essentially, it's actually giving us a robust, comprehensive look and a roadmap for the future. So I think it's the right choice, and really excited to work with this group.
All right, questions? What's the timeline for completion?
The contract is basically a year, but their target is 6 months for full completion. So you figure we're in July, probably early 2024.
Okay.
Probably the latest, realistically, February of 2024, unless we add to the scope of it, which we always could. So they're pretty flexible in terms of the way they work.
So we've got a contract between, are we looking for a resolution here?
No,
We've
and Karen,
already
we don't
passed it.
necessarily need a resolution. I just wanted to give the public sort of a transparent view of what's happening, because there's not a resolution with this, but.
There is a contract, so you do need to.
Right, you guys. Okay, so we will need a motion for consensus on this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Peck.
I think as a contract, this really ought to be approved through, at a minimum, well, it ought to be approved as a resolution, given the nature of contracts. And I've got, when the time's appropriate, I've got a couple of questions about the contract itself.
Now is the appropriate time.
Okay, I seem to recall, and I haven't looked at this too recently, but did I see in this contract part of the deliverables were for the contractor to tell us under, quoting, under what conditions should Franklin County approach voters to seek additional tax support, unquote? Is that part of what we're asking them to do?
We've floated around the idea for perhaps a lid levy lift, or a levy lid lift, I should say, but I've talked to them a little bit.
That
and-
language is in the contract. I'm reading that verbatim.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily have to do it. It's optional, and I think with the way that our assessments have gone up, we'll probably won't do that, because I think the likelihood of that passing is pretty minimal. And I was in contact with Clark Worth about that subject, and he actually said we probably shouldn't do it now. So that can be eliminated, but it's in there in case we want to add that to the scope.
You said you had multiple questions, Commissioner Peck, or just the one?
Yeah, I don't know if I said I had multiple questions or concerns, but there are a few things about the contract that I'm not particularly comfortable with, but we all have to decide which things we want to bring forward as issues and which things we just want to compromise and accept. I do note that we're paying a contractor, Mr. Gonzalez's tutor, to be a member of this group. And then we're paying a contractor to advise our contractor, and that seems a little redundant to me in a time of fiscal constraint. But again, not something I want to make a big issue of. He's part of the finance committee, I guess. So no, I don't think I have any other comments at this time. Thanks.
So since we don't have a resolution with this, is this on a time? Could we bring this back
It is
next
time
meeting?
sensitive.
It is.
So, I mean, I would prefer that you guys approve it now, and because we've got to get to the salary study ASAP.
186.
Yeah, I would just say that, our employees have been more than patient, and I don't think we should prolong it any further. I mean, we need to get started on it. And
So since we don't have a resolution, we could go with a motion of consensus.
Yes.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
a motion or a consensus?
I'm not
Motion
sure
for
that a motion
consensus.
for consensus is anything I'm familiar with in
Yeah.
Robert's rules or elsewhere.
So my consensus is that we approve the contract and get started because our employees have been more than patient. And the process is long and lengthy, and I think we should get it started as soon as possible.
There
I
is
agree.
an option to offer the county administrator direction to contact Consor and tell them that we've had a discussion about the contract. We're favorably disposed, but formal approval, and we're favorably disposed as indicated by consensus of a majority of the board, and that we anticipate formal approval at our next meeting once we have appropriate documents, i.e. a resolution. You could go that route as well. It lets them know that the current feeling is that we're intending to move forward, but it doesn't guarantee it until it's signed next week.
And I will say that Jeff Briggs has reviewed the contract and okayed it to move forward, so.
Yeah, and I would just remind that prosecutor's office reviews contracts never for content. It's for as to form. Are all the right blocks and required pieces of a contract present, not whether or not it's something they support or endorse. And that's an important distinction that sometimes gets lost in discussion. And I don't know that you meant that, but I just want to make that clear. So I'm happy to give consensus to have the county administrator notify them that this will be on our agenda for formal approval next week, and thus far, the board appears favorably disposed. If we're going to try and approve a contract under just a consensus, then I'll just vote nay, and you two gentlemen can approve it that way.
We can go with a motion of approval for the contract.
I think that would be the easiest way, because I haven't heard of a motion for consensus either, but,
Well, there's either a
I'm looking for,
consensus. Yeah.
just, a motion to
An
approve the
action.
contract.
Yep.
And let's get started, because, we don't have time to hem-haw around, the employees are demanding. We're at that point.
Make the motion to approve the contract as presented.
I'll second and request discussion.
There's been a motion and a second for the approval of the contract between Consource Salary Survey and Franklin County. Discussion.
Mr. Gonzalez, is this the only iteration, the only version of this contract?
There's been a few expansions of scopes, but that should be the latest.
Should be or is?
It is.
Okay, and is there a date that we got this latest contract?
Honestly, I could get that for you, so.
Jeff Briggs reviewed it on Friday, so I believe.
So, somebody count back for me, what is that, the 22nd, 23rd?
It is the 22nd we received it, the 23rd, because Jeff was not in his office on Thursday.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, I'll just ask the motioner to indicate his intent that the motion was to approve the version that was reviewed by our DPA on or about the 23rd. Reason I'm doing this is that there's history in counties where something is approved and then there's a debate or a discussion with a contractor about which version was approved. So just keeping the record tight so that there aren't any issues or problems. Any problem with that, Commissioner Mullen? You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Then
And
I
Chair,
have no other
permission to
questions.
speak.
Yes.
Karen was
Chairman,
correct.
point of
Thank you.
order.
What's the point of order?
We've got a motion on the table. I think this is discussion for the board at this point. If the board has questions to direct to the county administrator, that's a different matter.
A point of order is
Right.
been a mistake in the procedure, and I don't see a mistake in the procedure when we're discussing this, and there's a motion and a second.
So, Mr. Chairman, the discussion is for the Board of Commissioners who are considering a motion. If the board seeks or wishes to seek additional information from staff, they're free to do so, but for the staff to intercede on those discussions, I believe is out of order. But you can go ahead and rule either way. I'm not particularly concerned about Mr. Gonzalez weighing in further, I suppose.
I'd hope not. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm that Karen was in fact correct. So good. Thank you, Karen.
All right. So we got a motion and a second for the approval of the contract between Consor Salary Survey and Franklin County. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Now we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a busy several days, obviously working with Sean and his staff facing the crisis and OPD, so that's taken a lot of my time and energy, but I appreciate the Commissioner's support on that, because certainly we are at crisis mode. The Consor study is something we're finalizing, so thanks to Jeff Briggs, always does a great job for us on the civil side of things, so really just excellent to work with Jeff every single day, so thank you. The $5,000 employee retention pay, that's something Margot's been working real hard on with the unions, so I appreciate her efforts. Margot's also working really hard with the benefits committee as we look at different options to better our insurance this year, so really commend Margot for stepping up with her leadership in her office, so really appreciate it. Been working quite a bit with the sheriff and the auditor's office on the dispute, which I think most people know. It's been pretty public, so been sort of a mediator between those departments and working with the PA's office on that as we try to look at policies and different issues. Other than that, just really keeping busy and you know, trying to better the county every single day.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck.
Meetings this week included the Hanford Area Economic Fund, Investment Trust. It's a regular meeting, but we did have some pretty extensive discussion on pending litigation, which obviously is an executive session. We went through the loan portfolio, and the board took a public action to suspend any loan activities until further notice. Washington State Association of Counties update yesterday was on urban forestry related grants. Franklin County is not necessarily a place that you think of in terms of forest issues, but in fact this is urban forestry, and I'd encourage the county administrator to follow up with WASAC and get the details, but there is a broad range of eligible categories for these grant dollars for urban forestry, which could be something as simple as creating a new park and planting a bunch of trees. And many of these grants are not match grants. Some of them are full grants. So this is an unusual circumstance. Well, I shouldn't say that. It does happen occasionally, but money has flowed down from the federal government through the state, and now it's available to counties. And the process will run over the next probably 9 months or so. And the key dates to get in touch with them and get the details are probably within about the next 30 to 45 days. Met with Port of Benton official on airport infrastructure in my role as a member of the Washington State Aviation Aerospace Advisory Committee to the state legislature. Shoreline reconveyance meeting conversation with Mr. Replog from TRIDEC about the multi-year effort to reconvey the currently Corps of Engineers owned shorelines along the Columbia River over to local municipalities with some tribal involvement. And I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen.
So I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Bratton about permitting policies and procedures, and I would just like to add that the permitting process, asks certain questions, and I think that in order to expedite the process, just give as much information as possible pertaining to the permit, and I know that their office is working very hard and diligently, and the return time on permitting has improved greatly. I think they're 2 to 3 weeks out, which great job to everybody in that department. And if you have questions about the permitting process, I would suggest just give Mr. Bratton a call. They're more than glad to take calls and aid in your process for for filling out the permits. Also had the opportunity to speak with Rachel Glazier from Ben Franklin Transit. She's been holding town hall meetings. I think she's doing a great job. So just want to give kudos to her on that. Making, I think, in my opinion, some great progress. Had multiple calls about the need for better communication between all of us, and I couldn't agree more. I think we all need to work together as a team, and a lot of things can be diverted and not aired out into the public, because even being transparent, but the goal is to work together as a team. And with that, I just also want to say a great job to Mr. Gonzalez. He's done a great job of keeping updates and keeping me informed of what's going on of county business and of the future meetings. It's been great. I do appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And that is my report for the week.
Last week was a budget meeting that never happened, and I am going to ask, I don't think Mr. Gonzalez got a notification, neither did I, and I've asked him to look into that and make sure that we are getting the notification so that we can attend that meeting, because that is a very important meeting. Did get the information, and the county is making adjustments. The sales tax isn't as lucrative as it once was with the COVID crisis, but it is still on the plus side. Agenda meeting. And then I've had lots of calls and conversations with constituents out there about their taxes, and I'm encouraging everybody to get a hold of the assessor's office, and if they feel like they're unduly assessed a value on their property that is not to their liking, then they should appeal to the canvassing board, or not the canvassing board, but the Board of Equalization, excuse me, Board of Equalization. And then I did a lot of driving over the weekend. And I'd have to say that on the most part, North Franklin County, from Pasco to Eltopia, a lot of the roads are in really good shape. But there is one road, and it's East 395, where there's a lot of commerce being done on that road. We have a lot of big businesses out there, and that road is rough. And I think that in all fairness to those businesses that are creating a lot of revenue for the county, we ought to look into East 395 of making that an all-weather road. I think that's something that's to be considered, and I encourage everybody to go out and drive it themselves. That's 395 East, and you'll see what I'm talking about. With that, we'll move down to elected and department head business. Is there any elected or department heads?
Michelle Andrews, Chairman of the Civil Service Commission. It is my duty to let you know I am going to resign due to many, many problems during the turnover of 4 HR directors, the entire department, hiring people that do not understand civil service, and you have some issues that you need to deal with. You have promotions that was done incorrectly. There's been 2 offers in cooperation with the prosecuting. Oh, by the way, I've had 3 different civil deputies to work with. I have to educate people that there's a legal, that I can only operate in the parameters of what the Civil Service Act prescribes. When something's done illegally, I can't sign off on things. I can't. I can't. Do you understand? I can't. And then I proceed to go to the civil deputy's office and try to resolve and issue 2 different solutions: to retest so the Civil Service Commission can properly review and promote people within the department. I have declared to you that there's been a shortage for quite some time, that there's a risk for our unsung heroes that work in corrections, very different from road deputy. And just to let you know, I came and went on a drive with the deputies, went and saw the jail. I also did it with Benton to see if there are any differences, to educate myself as a civilian, a volunteer civilian that has spent hours and hours and hours trying to come alongside the turnover in this county. And I have grieved deeply for the fragility that our county is in. I have nothing against the sheriff. I voted for him twice. There's been great improvements. I've seen him have to go through a lot of other suits that I don't have privy to. My job is to do and enact the civil service action. And when I seek to say, is there some overriding law that I'm not aware of, I don't get an answer. When I have a civil service deputy of 18 years review and give a recommendation, and then it's objected to by the next 2, and a call to the AG's office, and I said, okay, if that's what the AG says, please give me the RCWs. The only person that gave me RCWs is not here anymore. 18 years experience, walked out that door. And so I'm left hanging as a volunteer, trying to educate, and we have 2 letters of resignation. And they went through the heat. It takes a while to understand the Civil Service Act. There's just simply things you cannot do. And when you offer to resolve things, and they're refuted back with, I would say, very inappropriate emails. I have actually had to ask somebody to not use the F-bomb. I shouldn't have to ask that. No. If we had had an opportunity, I did have surgery, but I never said, don't call me. I left it open, okay? We would have had notice. I have a very good relationship with a stand-alone civil service department over in Walla Walla, and they are more than glad to help us. They may have needed some payment. We could have worked that out. If we had known that, we could have responded to certain things. There was an email that was not given to my brand-new chief examiner secretary, so I had to go find out where we were supposedly given documents, but that was after the fact of a test. The act says we have to do it. I have no flexibility in that. I'm accountable to the AG. And maybe that's who you need to call and just have them go through everything and help you guys out. I have sought separate counsel. Sean said I could do it, and he would have to make a deputy of them. I'm still waiting on that call. I should hear from him any day. The problem you have right now is that if we don't certify the people that were promoted, there's a procedure for payment of compensation, and I'll say it, so you should write this down, RCW 41.14.150. They cannot be paid that scale. Now you're going to have a problem with your unions, as I understand it, because I don't have a commission. I was in some conversations with some other people that did want to serve. And then people get very uncomfortable when they see this, and they keep asking for copies of it. The Civil Service Commission is not responsible for educating everyone, but we are responsible for reminding. The last HR director left because of incompatibility with certain departments that are in this room, and civil service got caught in the middle of that. They tried to boot us out right away. There's a process, and I emphasize that. I came into executive session and tried to discuss things. I don't know if I ever want to do that again. So, with very great regret and deep frustration, there's a lot of departments that should know better, and there's certain people in this room that have actually kind of managed what we should know as a volunteer civil service department. We are representatives of the state. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Is there anybody else, department heads or elected officials?
So I just witnessed that in the meeting today that we were discussing a crisis in offices, and I'm just confused. Is OPD considered in the same, is it similar to all the other county offices, or is it separate?
We have to provide that for everybody that goes to
Right,
court.
okay, so they're an office like our office.
Yes.
Because what I witnessed is just now, board consensus to help identify the crisis in OPD and voting for what Larry needed for his office. So that's what I was confused about, because our office is in the same crisis, yet the questions that were asked and the non-support that we got, because we're an office very similar to OPD. I realized you guys did end up voting for it, but that is just a concern that I have, because one of the things that you addressed, Commissioner Didier, was that there's going to be courthouse dissension if we approve this 10% increase for our attorneys, a one-time retention.
Yeah.
None of that's ever been brought up before when we've done one-off decisions for all the other hiring within the last 2 years, when we've reorganized offices.
Including your office, when we did those 2 positions here not too long ago.
Just recently with the ARPA money, yeah.
And we did those, yes.
And so I just feel like our office is similar to OPD, but yet there are so many questions, and it feels like it just feels like it's never fair, like our office is always going to be treated less. So the other comment I had was just the fact that it was brought up about Sean working in the office, and is he here? I think all elected officials, commissioners and everyone, I don't know what the requirement is, but I've been told, and this, don't quote me, I could be wrong, that you only have to be in the office 1 day out of the year if you're an elected. Is it something like that? Anyway, I remember that when we've had other people in the military that didn't report to work.
Yeah, if I remember right, and don't quote me either, I think the statute requires a physical presence once every 30 days or once a month.
Okay.
But in a broader context, I'll just be succinct. I take great offense to innuendo and suggestion that people who are off serving their country in uniform somehow are derelict in their duties here because they're not here every day. That's about as cheap a shot as I can imagine somebody taking.
I think I was upset by that, just because we have lots of elected officials that I don't see here near as often as I see Sean. And to paint just one elected official about that, they don't punch a time clock. And I know that I take phone calls from Sean late at night, weird hours of the day when he is on military duty, because he might not be able to sometimes get away during the day, but he is in contact with the office at all times when he's on military duty. And I could show you my phone logs for the times that we've done updates at odd times of the day, just to keep him apprised, and not only me, but other chief criminal deputies and civil deputies that he keeps in contact with. So I just don't want to have him singled out as not being, sometimes when you work, you're not physically in the office. If we were going to keep track of that, I think other elected officials would be, as far as physically being in the office, way below how much time he's physically in the office. But yeah, just the whole situation with OPD and our office being very similar, I think that if you would have questioned them as similarly as you did us, it would be, I could see it, but I just didn't see that happen. I mean, when we hire, even what Sean did get passed today, we're still in a crisis situation. It's still a Band-Aid. And he still is going to, when he hires someone in his office, he's got to go by experience of how many years of service, of experience that they have at that level before he can offer those levels. So it's still going to be something that, if we can't find anybody, we're going to still be at the 1 and 2 steps, versus maybe in other offices where they're going to give someone, lots of years of experience when they don't have it because they're not being questioned. So, thank you.
Any other department heads or elected officials?
Commissioners, I placed in front of each of you a flyer for National Night Out, August 1st. I hope that we can promote it out. Yeah, as some of you know, it's became a big event in Basin City every year for National Night Out and continues to grow and grow and grow. And if we could get Rocky to give us, I don't know, 500 pounds of steak, we could probably get more people going. But
I'd be satisfied if you just put them in a dunk booth like you did me.
yeah, there you go. Void of that, I believe it's hot dogs, hamburgers. We see each year somewhere around 200, upwards to 400 people come and go for the National Night Out. It is a great community event that we encourage you all to at least stop by. And for the record,
Oh, I think you're going there.
for the record, the foundation, the Sheriff's Office Foundation, businessmen in the county and businesses in the county support and finance this, and no tax dollars are being used for it.
Yeah, I was there last year. It was a great event. And I believe it was Lamb Weston was there handing out free French fries and
Yep.
a lot of kids having a great time. I think it just shows the support in the community for our law enforcement, and it was a great activity.
All righty.
You don't get off scot-free, Commissioners. So this is the last Commissioners' meeting prior to the end of the ability to file an appeal of your assessed values, not your taxes. I want to clarify that. That word keeps getting used, that it's people's taxes are going. It is your assessed value that is absolutely incorrect. In fact, Mr. Hollingsworth, even as an outside fee appraiser, mentioned the fact that even the data that he had been able to see and get that are within a less than a 3% error rate. And I can tell you, if you put time adjustments in there, that's less than 1%. It's way less than 1% that it would be off from what most anybody would agree with, less than 1%. I can tell you that we have made some adjustments. Out of 40,000 parcels, we've made a little over 250, I think, adjustments that we've within our statutory ability to do, keeping things fair and equitable. We cannot do one-offs like the Board of Equalization is allowed to do. And so I encourage people to file the paperwork. You don't need to get an appraisal. You don't have to. It's not that complicated. If you look at it, you can go back and listen to board hearings. They're recorded and they're on the website for the county, so you can do that. It's not a huge deal, and I don't want people to get scared about doing that and exercising their rights as an individual in this county for that. They have the right to do that. I will tell people right now that they may not be able to sit down or get satisfaction from an appraiser between now and the 3rd, because we have to get back to people also that are on our limit. We've got probably 80, 90 people yet that we're working with, and with a limited amount of staff to be able to really get deep into some of that, we're not going to be able to get everybody satisfied. However, if they file their appeal, it gives us time then to work with them and go through some stuff after that deadline. We cannot extend it. I know that was mentioned. Statutorily, there is a 30-day window from the day we mail those change of value notices till it ends, period. We can't extend it in our office. We can't make those changes because of statute. So please exercise public your right. We'll work with you afterwards. We'll do what we can within our legal obligation and rights and abilities. We can't fill the form out for people. We can certainly make sure that they know that there's some important parts on it, but the Board of Equalization is the only one that can maybe assist them on further information on that, and that she's limited on what she can do. So I just want to clarify that, with the board on where we're at there.
And
Staff's
John,
done an excellent job.
And clarify, if a landowner owns multiple parcels, they have to list every parcel on a separate piece of paper.
Each parcel is independent of the
Yes.
other on an appeal. That is
Yes.
correct. They have to have, now, fill out the majority of it, copy it, and then fill in the parcel number of that specific piece. It doesn't necessarily change, you know,
Right.
what they are.
Just want
So,
to make sure you can't put it all in one
now,
form.
I will tell you that my office believes that we're absolutely accurate. We got data and statistics to show that. We will defend those things, and it's up to the board to listen to that, and then listen to the petitioners and make a ruling on that. If people aren't satisfied with the Board of Equalization, they have the right to take it to the Board of Tax Authority, the Department of Revenue itself. So this isn't a one-stop and you're done. If you disagree with it, you can take it up to the BTA. The same as our office, and that's happened both ways. We have seen where the board ruled incorrectly. We've taken it to the BTA and won, and we've had individuals take it to the BTA and win. So that's the right of the individuals and taxpayers of this county. Okay.
All right. Thank
Mr.
you.
Rosenauer,
Yes.
question. And to be fair, right up front, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm hoping you do. Does your office or your function have any legal authority to knowingly assess properties at above market value?
No.
So
You're
when-
saying, are we mandated to
No,
assess
no,
above
that's-
market
that's
value?
not- No, let me ask again. To your knowledge, does your department, your function, the assessor's function, have any legal authority to knowingly assess or place a value for taxes, knowingly assess a property above market value?
So I don't want to dissect it too far, Commissioner. The standard says that we should fall between 90 and 110% according to the IAAO standards. The Department of Revenue and statute says they want us at 100% of market for our assessments. That's the statute says 100%. Do we fall short of that if the market's moving fast? Yeah, for the last several years, we have fallen short of that, and we're trying to catch up with some of those, plus the market's slowing down, and so people are seeing the squeeze. It's still within market assessment values, to include time adjustments that we are required to do.
So I've observed over a number of years of doing this that assessed values tend to trail market values by a few percentage points at least, 5% maybe. And I've always assumed, and you know that we're not supposed to assume, but it seemed like a reasonable assumption that we do that to avoid administrative processes that inadvertently assess somebody's property above actual market value. It's a buffer of sorts. And my perception is that your office is striving to get 100% of market value. And in so doing, is probably inevitably, unavoidably, drifting on both sides of that 100% mark, which means that some people are likely being assessed above actual market value. And so my question was really, is there any legal authority for you to do that? And I still frankly don't know the answer, but I'll try and go research.
Mass appraisal is a median, therefore you will have some above and some below.
Okay.
When we were at 85%, there were still some properties that would have fallen above 100. There was properties that probably fell at 60 because you're doing that mass appraisal median. We are statutorily required to be at 100%.
Of the median?
No, of market value. We're statutorily required to be at 100% of market value with time adjustments.
Per parcel?
Per parcel as a mass, as best we can, fall in there when they audit us. We try to fall into those numbers. Now, I will tell you this.
And not over 100?
Incorrect. It's a median. The assessments on mass will always have some over and some under in when you have
Right.
the grid out there. There's always going to be
but
that.
I get that, but you also said we're required to be at 100%.
A mass appraisal is required to be at 100% of market value.
And
It
that-
is a mass appraisal, not an
100
individual.
Right, 100% of median market value, not the high, not the low.
No, we take market value, and then when we're audited, you'll see the median, and some will fall above and below. But we look at as best we can to be at the 100% of market value with time adjustments. Something that sold in February of last year is definitely, there was an increase every single month over month to the end of December, and we have to time adjust that to what it should be end of December, 1st of January. So I can answer another question. Politically,
I'm not sure
most people
I'm not sure
are
I got
afraid.
the answer to the first
Well,
question,
I'm
frankly.
clarifying a little. Politically, many assessors are afraid to do what they're statutorily required to do because of the pushback, because the public doesn't understand that an increase or a fair assessment value of properties across the board does not unfairly tax people. In fact, it does the opposite and makes sure that everybody is paying their fair share of the taxes that you and the other taxing boards entities apply. We're not a taxing office. We assess the values. I can tell you they're fair, they're accurate. I'd like to address one other thing when you talk about bonus retentions and monies and so forth.
Maybe before we change
Yes.
subject. You know, you intimated pretty clearly that past assessors may have been, for political or other reasons, reluctant to go to 100%. I'll just offer my view is that they've been reluctant to risk assessing properties above actual market value.
And yet it occurred.
But we can have different
But
views
it
on
occurred.
that.
If it's fair and equitable across the board, it balances out on their share of the tax that you will impose and other taxing districts will impose.
And I do
Yeah.
clearly understand that, and regrettably,
Right.
not all of our taxpayers do, is that
That's correct.
the pool of money that comes to the county is only so big, and it can only nominally increase
Correct.
$1 for every $100 collected the previous year. So the pot of money is the same size.
Yeah.
And what really affects your taxes is two things, as I see it. One, the extent to which yours goes up and down relative to other people.
Correct.
But the part that I don't hear you speak too much, and I think is critical, is that this county's share of that tax pie is about 12%.
It's actually less than that now. It's closer to 10.
Okay, well, it was about
Yes.
12 a year or so ago, 2 years. And other entities, and it's hard to ignore schools, because that's, give or take 70%. Can you help clarify for people what the 90% of the tax pie, how that affects their tax bill as their assessments change? Because I can speak to it from the county standpoint. That's
Correct.
easy.
And where the county can raise 1% plus new construction, okay, for their budget.
Right.
Okay, and the new construction piece does affect the budget, which can affect the levy
Well,
rates.
it affects the total we collect,
Right.
but in terms
Every-
of the rates and the taxes, it's only the prior year collection plus one.
That's correct. All of the other taxing districts now are under the budget-based system. We're no longer under a rate base like the schools were for 4 years. They were under a rate base. So as assessment values went up, the schools still got that high so much per thousand. They got it. And as the thousands went up, they got even more money. That was the state Supreme Court that did that.
Right. And now that's changed, so that the schools,
2 years ago, that changed.
the
They're back
effect
to
with the
budget
schools
based.
is the same as it is with the county.
Yes, the cities, the counties, the
That's-
fire district, the
That's
hospital
not
districts.
widely understood, so I'm
No, it's
glad that
not.
you're speaking to it.
It is not. So it literally, if somebody's red, white, and blue houses all went up the same percentage, they're not going to pay any more than what the 1% plus some previous construction and that, and all of the districts is going to go up. And I know people don't understand that completely. And 2 years ago, it wasn't that way because of the schools. They were on a rate base, not budget based, which with the increase in the assessment values, i.e. sales prices of homes, the schools just, I think they came out smelling like a rose and then some, but that's my personal opinion.
Now, schools are not constrained by the same 1% cap that we are.
Not totally.
And
but
consequently, what you're saying, while hypothetically, theoretically, is mostly true, but the fact is, the schools can impact your tax bill a good deal more than the county.
Absolutely, by percentage.
Because they're not capped at that 1% that we are.
Not in the same way.
That's right. And because they're 60 to 70% of the total budget, what happens with the schools multiplied against your new assessed value can have a substantial effect.
It's, up until 2 years ago, it was really substantial. It's minimal now. However, if they vote in a school bond, which they did, that certainly takes its piece out of, the 195 million or whatever for the whole the whole Pasco School District for that one or any others. So it does do that. So just a shift on the other part of it for retention of employees. There's not an office here that hasn't had some difficulty retaining, okay? To include even trying to go out and replace people that did leave. I had a person leave, I'm trying to replace them, and can you replace them at that lower rate, which it's going to be difficult. I'll be back before you gentlemen next week with another proposal, and I will reach out to the person and see where I can absolutely get the rubber to meet the road as best I can. But money is not everything. It's appreciation. It's how you treat your staff. I would have had, I'm flat telling you, my staff has flat told me that they had opportunities to leave for even better pay. And many of them have chosen not to do that because they like working the way we run the office, how we run the office. The managers that I have managing the different departments, they like working for them. They're treated, I will say they're not treated like a number like many, many companies treat people. They're human beings, and we understand their needs, their wants, their desires, and we try to do our very best to accommodate what we can within the constraints that we have to do so on that. So will an increase of appreciation for any of them really be appreciated? Absolutely. I don't expect my staff to get that 10% that the prosecutor's office just got. I'm telling you straight up front, as an elected, I would personally vote against that. But do they need something? And do they need it to where I can literally, I believe, have a little bit of say over some definite areas? Because I've got more risk of losing here than I do there within my own office. So I just thought I'd voice my 2 cents for that, Commissioners.
Well, on that last point,
Yes.
you spoke to the inherent practice of targeting your retention bonuses. Doesn't mean you don't try to work something out for everybody, but you target your greatest risk. Because if you spread all those resources too thin, you don't accomplish any retention anywhere.
If it's thick enough to where you
so
can still retain,
I
great.
appreciate your remarks in support of targeting. I agree.
Number one, this county is up against some real challenges with the bigger counties around and the other counties around, and yet we have to do the same job at the same skill set at the same level, and usually do a higher percentage of the work with less employees, if you look at it per person. So would I train or trade my staff for some of the staff in some of these other counties that maybe you're making? I wouldn't trade a one of them. I'm flat telling you, we've got a superb staff that we've worked to develop to do. Fit is a huge one. Teamwork is a huge one. My acronym for team is to enhance another member. And if my people don't live by that, they're not going to last under my management. They need to be enhancing and helping one another. They do that. They're an excellent group. And I think the majority of the employees in this county are same that work for them.
And John, that's why I propose that we give a retention fund to each department, and we let the head of the department decide who they need to retain, not us.
Yeah, I like the idea of something across the board for people so nobody gets left out, because not all management views things the same way I'm voicing to you, and I don't want to see people inappropriately treated. I can tell you that I would deeply appreciate the ability to make some decision on some of the funds that were put into my hands in my office, to put it where I think is best needed and required for retention or training or even hiring people, because we're all in that boat. I've got one person that's going to be retiring that right now is irreplaceable. Their skill set and what they do is irreplaceable, gentlemen. We're going to be in, if we had to go out and hire a contract company to do it, one other county, one of our neighboring counties had to do that very thing. It cost them 3 times more in 1 year than by getting that other staff member in and getting them trained early. So we're going to pay. It's a matter of, we're going to pay up front and less, or we're going to pay on the back end and more. So we got to be very wise in how we do it.
All right, thank you. Is there any other elected or department heads.
I was going to say, just for clarification, John, the last day to appeal your tax assessment is July 3rd. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Oh, yeah.
July 3rd.
Sorry, Commissioner. July 3rd is Monday, the day before the 4th and the holiday. I would not wait till the 3rd. Number one is I don't know that Jennifer can handle a volume coming in on the last day in the BOE office. And I don't know if, Mike, you've got any extra, or Shirley, or anybody's coming in. Jennifer may need it. We're staffed up, of course, to help, but we are statutorily only able to help so much. I mean, we walk them over. We can't look at their appeal and say, yeah, you got everything you need. We can't legally do that. We can maybe point a couple things out saying, you may want to make sure you get this filled out right here, this section, right? So we try to do that. I would highly encourage people to get it done this week. And then if there's some stragglers for Monday, great, but get it done. It does not, you don't have to have all your data up front. Get your appeal filed, get it filed this week. I can tell you that we are way down on what I anticipated for appeals. We're way under, we're under what one of our neighboring counties was under last year. So I anticipate, and so to the Department of Revenue, they gave me a number of what they thought we would be at, doing things the correct way. I had a number of what I thought. We are under that number. We are not even at where I think would probably be a normal filing amount for our county.
The week is still young.
It is, and people wait till the last week, and I'm trying to encourage them, don't wait too long. Get the paperwork in. The BOE, you don't file it with us, you file it with the Board of Equalization, and they are really limited on staff and abilities. So she can date stamp stuff real quick, but I don't think Mike wants a line out the door, up the stairs, and out the security building, right?
Not
Even though
really.
that's never happened yet, but I mean, that's the accusation. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's no other department heads or elected officials, we'll move down to administration office business, Mike.
I don't have any, sir.
Okay, and then public comment. Is there anybody for public comment?
George Dockstetter. I don't mind the paying the bonuses for Office of Public Defenders or our prosecuting attorney. Those are special circumstances. But I sure as hell don't want to see a pool where everybody in the county is getting a retention bonus. That's what? How many total employees we have? 371 or 471?
It's public comment.
You want me to,
Go ahead.
So
Tell-
that's
it's
fine.
around 275. Just
Not counting the road department.
well, if you
Count the
talk
road
about part-time
department as a-
employees, it's maybe close to 300, but it's not that high.
$1.5 million. Those people have been working here. And I said before, they worked during COVID. Oh, maybe they didn't have to show up and plant their butt in a desk, but they got paid every week. They got their insurance. They didn't lose their business. They didn't lose their car. They didn't lose their house. And now you're wanting to give them extra money. That's part of the deal for working for the county or the federal government. It used to be you got less money, but you got security. Now all of a sudden, government workers are the top dogs in the pay scale. And we're the ones out there paying for it. Thank you.
Just wanted to, market value, the term market value has been thrown around a lot, and I just wanted to explain what is entailed in market value. Market value isn't just placing a value, it's a price and a date. What they're saying is that your house is worth this, and it will sell for this within the date, the time frame that they disclose. Generally, in our market right now, in most segments, it's under 90 days. So what as an appraiser, we're saying is, if I appraise your house, I'm saying this is your market value, that it will sell at this price within this time frame of 90 days. if it doesn't sell, as a fee appraiser, I have liability on that. They could go after my E&O insurance. My question, a little bit rhetorical due to the comment section, is, does the county have anything like that? Are they liable? If a homeowner is assessed well over and they put a sign out front for 30 days or whatever the assessor states is the exposure time, and it doesn't sell, is there any recourse? Because I would lose, I'd be sued, I'd be fined and potentially even lose my license if I had it on a scale of potentially what we're dealing with. And then the other point I wanted to bring up, in my industry, we have what I call form fillers. They're appraisers, know how to fill out a form. They don't know the how or the why, they just know what they have to do. Last week, the chief appraiser said that, we put stuff in the model, if it doesn't work, it kicks it out, we have to keep trying. That tells me that they don't know what they're doing. They just know that they have to do something, but they don't understand the process of why they do what they do. It's just that they know what they have to do. And so that's a concern. And it might even be an indication of why we're so far off on everything. And I would hope that they would continue educating on mass appraisal and understand the why they do what they do, not just what they have to do.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else for public comment?
Kathy Sant, Franklin County. A lot of employers, municipalities and private employers, cities, counties, they have what's called the veterans preference, where if you have served in the armed forces, you get some kind of a benefit for that. And I'm concerned that in this county, when you are either serving in the armed forces currently or have served and are retired, you get punished for that. I take great offense to the accusations that have happened in the last 2 weeks by Commissioner Didier about Sean Sant being at the office and working. I can guarantee you he works damn hard. And I can say that he gets calls middle of the night. I have gotten him to take a family vacation last spring breaks because our youngest child is graduating high school next year, and it's been hard to get him to do those things. So, and he takes calls during those times when there is a murder trial going on. He maybe sleeps at home for 4 hours a night. Other than that, he's at work. So it's very disparaging to hear those comments and offensive to me as a military spouse. And when we were newly married, my husband left his employment as a police officer to join the Air Force. And as a migrant, I had never been exposed to the military in the U.S. before. And I take great pride in the military members in this country who serve, have served, and will serve. And when we start the commissioner meetings every week with the Pledge of Allegiance, when there is anti-military comments made, the Pledge of Allegiance rings very hollow. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone?
We did have a gentleman on the phone, Commissioner, but apparently hung up, and he's gone, so.
Okay, I'd like to make the announcement that our next meeting is July 5th. It's on a Wednesday of next week. We will have a meeting next week on Wednesday, July 5th. And with that, I think we're going to move into executive session. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, sir, we are, and let me get the executive session.
I got it right here. It's RCW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses I, litigation, potential litigation. And for how long do you think we need to go in for?
Looking at 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Because we went from 3 to 2 now, right? Under this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 30 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, before we move into executive session, just a question. Who made the decision that we'd have a meeting next week on Wednesday?
That'd be the chairman.
You did.
That's the chairman. Yes, Ms. Milham.
That was proposed on the 1st of January when we
That's right. Thank you.
All right, so do we need to take a recess, a 5-minute recess before the?
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
So we've had a pretty long meeting today.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll be back at 12:08 for the executive session.
Oh.
No. No.
All right, we have come back from our 5-minute recess. We are going to remove ourselves from regular order to executive session at 12:08. At this time, we'll recess into executive session. For how long? 30 minutes. We have come out of executive session because we do not have our, we have come out of executive session because we don't have our legal attorney here in the room, which we need for this executive session. So we are in standby until we get our legal representation here. Under this same RCW. All right, we're live in session. We're going to move into exec session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, litigation, potential litigation for 15 minutes, and at this time we'll recess into executive session.
Thanks. So we'll come out, I'll hold the door.
How long do you want on this one?
10 minutes.
Okay.
No, this is an executive session.
We have come out of executive session, and we're going to return to executive session under the same RCW for 10 minutes. And at this time, we will recess into executive session. All right, we've come out of executive session. We're back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.